Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is a brand new episode of Bets and Banter. This week on the show, we're talking about UFC 292. We're talking, of course, about Sugar Sean O'Malley taking on Aljamain Sterling for the Bantamweight Championship. It's going down at the TD Gardens in Boston. And guys, we've got bets and banter to break down. My name is Liam. I pick fights each and every week on this channel, but we can't do it alone on Bets and Banter. We're bringing in two heavy hitters, two guys that track their work on Bet MMA, two guys that we're really excited to talk to. So without further ado, let's introduce our guests on the show. First and foremost, you know him, you love him, returning friend of the show, our guy, Jewish Better. How are you, my brother? Welcome back.
I'm back like a chiropractor, baby. I got something to say, baby. Who does it better? Who do it better than the Jewish Better? L'chaim, my friend, and mazel tov to everybody out there. I promise you, I got you some good breakdowns and bets for this one.
Excited to hear it, my man. Excited to have you back once again. And we've got a first-time friend of the show, our guy, Dravy, in the building. For the first time, I've been seeing your breakdowns on Twitter, my man. I love how analytical you are with your breakdowns. So I wanted to give you the platform, bring you on the show, and hear what you have to say about these fights. Brother, welcome aboard. Excited to talk to you and excited to introduce you to the audience, brother.
Hey, thanks for having me, Liam. It means a lot. And I can't wait to talk about the fights. That's a banger of a card. And I think the dog's going to be barking. So, yeah.
I absolutely love it, my man. If you've ever watched this program before, looking for dogs, a man after my own heart. So without further ado, gentlemen, let's start how we always do. We start from the bottom of the card, work our way all the way on up to the top. And speaking of live underdogs, there's been a lot of love coming in the way of Marina Moroz here in this very first fight of the night. So without, getting ahead of ourselves, let's start with the odds here. Currently, we're looking at a plus 135 on Bet Online. It actually opened as a minus 135. That's surprising to me. I didn't realize that, but I think on domestic sports books, it kind of peaked over at that plus 150 type number and has been working its way back down. So that's an interesting note. It's an immediate flip offshore. So probably some early action came in the way of the underdog here. Karine Silva, if people aren't aware, this is a rematch. This fight happened, I believe it was all the way back in 2014 between these two women. It was a submission win for Marina Moroz, right? I think if you ask the average fan, they would be surprised to hear that. Oh, goodness gracious. We got a phone going off. How unprofessional of me. But in any case, guys, I think that when you look at a fight like this on paper, I do think it screams some potential volatility. I was rewatching before we got on the air the fight between Marina Moroz and Maria Agapova, and she had great positions in that fight, takedowns early, and then she gave up bad positions. So I'm going to throw this over to our guy, Jewish Better, first. How do you feel about this fight, brother? Break it down for us.
I got you, my man. That's a very interesting point, and John Danaher actually says it kind of best. He said, and it makes sense when the time you're most susceptible to get caught in a submission is when you go for a submission attempt and you fail yourself. And that's something Karine Silva could be doing at certain points in this fight. Same for Marina Moroz. Like you said in that fight versus Agapova, I believe you were talking about is when she had her back, she fell off the top. Moroz goes for the armbar, isn't able to get it in that spot. And I think, that last fight, I kind of don't consider it too much because it was so long ago for me personally. But I do think, Karine Silva is going to be the person that's making the more improvements. I believe she trains at the same gym as Wellington Term. And the only thing is, on paper, like I've been looking for a chance to fade this girl, and I think this could be one of the spots for sure. If you don't let Silva set her feet, she doesn't have the best striking. It's one at a time. She likes that front kick up the middle, the 1-2 to the head kick. Although she was able to get Poliana Botelho out of there, I believe it because Poliana Botelho never decided to press forward. If Marina Moroz decides to press forward in this spot and throw hands, I think the later the fight goes, Karine's unproven cardio could come back to bite her. And just the IQ decisions herself as well, right? Falling back for leg locks necessarily isn't the most high percentage move in MMA, although it did wind up getting her that win versus Ketlin Souza. I just don't know if I want to continue to doubt Karine Silva. She's one of those people that she has the opportunistic finishing ability in the jiu-jitsu, and you cannot doubt that about her. And although her striking may not be the best, I don't think Moroz's is either. Moroz does come from the better gym, but here's the thing. if I got to make a lean in this fight, it's gonna be Moroz as an underdog. But I think as a bet, I don't know if I could bet on this fight. But maybe if that's the case, and I'm banking on the cardio of Silva going bye-bye in the end of this fight, maybe Moroz round 3 could be a proper bet. Maybe even like Moroz round 3 submission, depending on the number. Interesting. But that's all I got for this fight, man. Boring, not boring, but low-level women's MMA, in my opinion.
Honestly, I feel like both of these women are not terrible fighters at all, and they're both pretty experienced. So it kind of speaks to the depth of this card. Most UFC cards we're talking about really bottom of the barrel, and so among low level WMMA, this is like the best that you could do, right? So I think that Karine Silva, she's a violent girl. I picked Ketlin Souza. I didn't bet her because I felt like it was a pretty volatile fight. But I was like, you know what? If Ketlin keeps us on the feet, it's going to be, a bang out war. And instead, she gets caught in one of the most disgusting, finishes that you'll see with a leg lock. Honestly, guys, I train leg locks. I got my Henzo Gracie, sweatshirt on today, right? I train leg locks. I train with good leg lockers. I had no idea what happened there. I had no idea what move she hit. It was pretty high level stuff. It felt like to me, pretty advanced.
Man, I don't think so, bro. I'm a leg lock
Really?
savant. I will take this one. No, I'm just playing.
Oh, please
But
go ahead. Go ahead.
that was my. I think more so she just reaped over the knee, and the way that Souza tensed her knee up caused the break there. Normally, I've seen in her past fights, though, Silva will pass that leg over to the inside heel hook position. But this is a complete. I would go in on this topic because this is something I've just been studying lately. It's the Z-lock position, but she didn't actually go for the Z-lock break. She had an ankle lock grip, and it was a lateral knee bar, and that's why they marked it down as lateral knee bar, because it just hasn't been seen. Yeah, she reaped over the top, and the knee was on the outside, but the way she hipped in, interesting how they said it. But it is a Z-lock, lateral knee bar, all the same shit. It's from the outside Ashi position, reap to the inside. But I think she did it by accident. That's just my theory.
Dude, the thing for me was I look at that and I combine it with the other body of evidence, and I say, this girl's really clever with her submissions. And just if you're letting Marya Agapova take your back for a minute in a cage fight, it doesn't make me bullish at the short underdog price. If we're talking a plus 200 here or something like that, I would be a lot more bullish. But it does kind of feel like you're flying in a little blind here. What I would be more tempted by is the ends by sub in this fight, because I feel like both ladies are going to be aggressively hunting for those positions based on what I've seen from them. And also, you look, I think only one Karine Silva fight has ever made it to the scorecards, as a matter of fact. So she hasn't won that fight. That's why everybody talks about her cardio and whatever. But she's just a girl that is kind of kill or be killed. That's how she approaches the game. And I feel like, maybe she has a willing dance partner here. My guy, Dravy, how do you feel about this fight, brother? Do you think there's anything worth betting on here?
Yeah, I think there's some value on Moroz here. I think she should be a slight favorite, to be honest. I got on that line early. That line got up to plus 170. I was able to get plus 165, which I think is very, very good. Thank you. And also up on the round 2, round 3, plus 1500 and plus 2000. I think the line just crazy because I think Silva is very dangerous, especially in the first round. And I think her grappling is very good. Like if she get on top early, it might be trouble. But we have seen Moroz on bottom or just on top on the ground with like girl like Bueno Silva, and she was able to stay safe. She's doing the right thing on the ground. So I'm not too worried about her getting submit here. And if she's not getting submitted early, I think that she's gonna be fine because we know Silva cardio is not great, right? Just on the contender series fight, we know after 6 minutes was not looking good. Now she's getting some finishes in 2 minutes, so she looks good doing it. But now she's taking a step up in competition, and I think it's gonna show in this fight because after the first round, I think Moroz like minus 200. To be honest, I think the cardio advantage is pretty wide. I also think she's the better striker. And I think she's very live for finish late. So I love the round props. And I think if anyone win a decision, I think that's going to be her. And just the line doesn't make sense to me. Moroz training at ATT. I think she's going to come in with the right game plan. I think that Silva on the feet, I think she's pretty basic. She does have some power, but like her striking is not very good. She's low volume. She's not very accurate, but she does have power. But Moroz is pretty tough. Like that girl is tough. She has never been finished. And like she has everything I want to bet against Silva: tough, cardio, experience, and a very good ground game. So I think she's gonna be fine here. I think she's gonna find a late finish. So yeah, give me Moroz to win by, I'll say, third round finish.
I like it, man. It in some ways it does kind of remind me of the Agapova archetype. Agapova has some dangerous skills early on, but when she gasses out, the cardio dump is just absolutely significant. So I think that there could be somewhat of a similar dynamic here. I think Karine Silva is a better fighter, but I do think that later on in the fight, she's made. I talk about fighters like this where they don't go from like good to terrible. They just go from being, pretty good in the first round to being much more average in rounds 2 and 3. And I think that that's kind of the bill that she fits as well. So with that being said, gentlemen, let's move along to the next fight here. We've got Andrea KGB Lee taking on Natalia Silva, and KGB, much more known quantity in terms of her UFC resume, fought a little bit higher brand of competition as well, but she's been stumbling in her recent competitions, has really struggled to piece together a win streak, certainly, but even to just get judges on her side. I talk about fighters like this where they can't buy a win in the UFC. Even if they go out there and change up their game plan, they strike, they lose the decision. They go for takedowns, they lose the decision. It feels like they can't get a break to go their way. But now she's taking on somebody who she's going to be a lot bigger than, as far as I'm remembering. Yeah, 2 inches of height for Andrea Lee here and about 4 to 5 inches of reach here. So if it stays a primary kickboxing match, it's somewhat interesting, I suppose, but I do think you've got a case of girls going in opposite directions where Andrea Lee, it's not like she looked terrible in her last fight, but it does seem like she's kind of just stagnated, hasn't made much progress in the division. Whereas it seems like a girl like Natalia Silva is kind of taking the division by storm, a name that's on a lot of people's minds. So she's in an opportunity here where I felt like the Jasmine Jazidou Vicious fight is kind of a decent parallel, at least in my mind. A girl that's big, physical, strong, knows how to wrestle, and she really struggled in that fight, And I think that Natalia Silva was much more of an unknown commodity there. I think people are going to know they don't want to stand up on the feet with her unless they're able to dictate the range and keep her at bay because she's got really dangerous spinning attacks and power, for WMMA standards. So I think this is an interesting fight, but you just don't catch me laying minus 360 in WMMA. Maybe I'm missing out on great opportunities, but unless it's Tatiana Suarez, fighting a grandmother or something, that's just not something I do. It's not part of my strategy. So I feel like Natalia Silva is probably going to get the win here, but I don't feel at all compelled to bet on this fight. Dravy, we will start with you, my brother. How do you feel about this one? And do you think there's any betting value on the underdog here?
I like Silva as a prospect. I think she's very good. I think she's gonna make it into the top 10. To be honest, I think she's very good on the feet. Her striking is crisp, like her footwork, her speed, her power. She has everything. And then what I like the most is the elite takedown defense. Like that girl is hard to take down, and we have not seen that a lot in the UFC so far. But she does have very good grappling. So I think in this fight, if you look at Lee, if she was able to make the Barber fight very close. I thought she probably won that fight, if we're being honest, but she was able to make that fight close because of the wrestling, because she was able to mix in takedowns. And we know Barber's takedown defense is not very good, but I don't think she's going to be able to wrestle in this fight. I think it's quite the opposite. If Silva won, I think she has the wrestling and the grappling upside, and I think she's the better striker. But yeah, Lee's pretty tough, so I don't really see a finish. I think it's going to be a decision. And yeah, I did parlay Silva. Maybe it's a mistake, and I'm gonna regret it. But I'm really buying the hype here on her. I think she's very good, and Lee tend to fight close against anybody. She's not really like she has all this split decision against Gerald, and I'm not really high on, And I think that it's the time of Silva. She's much younger. I think she's faster. I think she has wrestling, grappling upside. And yeah, I think she's live for a finish. I'm not saying she's going to get one, but if anyone get a finish, I think that's going to be her. And yeah, I think that the speed difference is going to be wild. Lee volume worry me a little bit. I'm not going to lie, because she does have good pace and good volume, but I don't see her being able to wrestle here. So yeah, I think Silva's going to win a clear decision, 30-27. So I did parlay her at minus 350.
Yeah, I don't even mind it. I don't bet parlays a lot either, right? So it's just not a part of my strategy. But in this kind of case, I think that she's probably one of the clearer sides to me. It looks like on the card in terms of who the UFC would prefer gets the nod, right? Also, as I kick it to my guy Jewish Better, I'll just put a quick narrative nation out there, which is that there's a huge Brazilian population in Boston, right? If you look at the demographics of the city, they have a huge Brazilian community there. So are they going to be out in force on Saturday night? I would think that they are. Is there a reason that they have, these Brazilian prospects lined up throughout the card? I think that there is. So, just a little bit of merit to that angle here. Jewish Better, how do you feel about this one, brother? Any value on the dog here, or you agree that the favorite should roll?
I don't know, man. It's women's MMA. I would be extremely careful, honestly, with any parlays in this spot. But that being said, this is another Silva who's at the moment riding really high, right? Her wins in the UFC, I believe she didn't finish Jasmine Jasudavicius, but she had chances in that spot. So I wouldn't be guaranteeing this fight goes to decision either. She's coming off 2 knockouts. 2 of her last 3 fights have finished. And you look at Andrea Lee, I believe the same for her, you could say as well, if I'm not mistaken. So I wouldn't necessarily be locking in that this fight goes the distance. She did drop a Rojo, I believe, in her fight as well. But Uncle Weezy actually made a great point earlier in the week that the 3 types of fighters she fought are very unsimilar to the matchup and stylistic of Lee. And I just always want to be careful when I'm betting these like big women's MMA favorites, right? I think Silva's good, though. I think she's smaller, right? A lot smaller in this fight. So Andrea Lee will have the physicality advantage, but that size, I believe, gives her good cardio. She doesn't have to cut a lot of weight, and she always has a speed advantage in basically every single one of her fights. She uses it to her advantage as well with her footwork, right? She throws these spinning attacks, but with those spinning attacks, you got to be careful. As we saw in Alexa Grasso versus Valentina Shevchenko, you could wind up on the ground, and this is the thing, right? Lee doesn't really go for those body lock takedowns. She likes the double leg. She'll shoot. She got it on Barber, who's a lot bigger than Silva, to be honest. And Bleda was able to use that size against her. Actually, that was a 1-1 fight going into the third. Bleda just absolutely gassed. So you can't tell me that Andrea Lee isn't a live underdog and that she couldn't use some type of grappling in this spot if Bleda was able to do it. I don't think Bleda's some world beater at 20 years old at all by any means. So if she's able to take down Natalia Silva, the thing is with Natalia Silva, yeah, she does have good takedown defense, but I think it's more so up against the cage when she could find that. I think Andrea Lee has to go for open mat takedowns if she wants to really be successful. She can't go for upper body takedowns either. We saw Jasmine Jasudavicius tried to do that. Didn't work. And I think the thing in that Jasmine Jasudavicius fight that I want to say is she got caught off guard, man. Nobody knew who the hell Natalia Silva was coming in that fight. Jasudavicius was a minus 245 favorite for a reason because any film you had on Natalia Silva, she looked absolute trash. She didn't look anything like the version we're getting today. She absolutely has improved since then. I thought she looked great in that fight, though. She was leading Jasmine in the strikes, and Jasmine just was behind the 8 ball in that spot. I think Lee is a little bit better. I think she's fought better competition. That being said, I don't know if I'm going to get to a bet on this. I just said my thought is that Bleda fight. I saw that Bleda fight. She was getting taken down. She's able to recover her guard, but she never gets back to her feet. So at the same time, man, I know Lee's the older fighter. I know Silva's supposed to win, but I would lean, if anything, the under 2.5 in this spot. I think if you're betting the over, you're betting the fight goes the distance, you're going to be clenching your cheeks because Silva has finishing potential and on the mat as well. She does sport a good armbar. So this is going to be an interesting fight. I'm not laying any chalk on a women's MMA fight like this. So if I have to make a pick, I'll go Lee plus 3.5. I think she at least wins 1 round in this spot. That's my pick.
I have only ever bet on either of these women a handful of times. I've never bet on a Natalia Silva fight, and I bet on Andrea Lee 1.1 units at plus 114 against Cynthia Calvillo. What a gift. I can't believe I didn't bet more on that. But in any case, Cynthia Calvillo is how do you really rate that win at this point? It's not really that notable of a win to have. So I don't know, man. To your point, though, you had said 2 of her last 3, it was 2 of her last 4 have finished inside the distance for Lee.
The Lee, right?
Yeah, and I think it's 2 of her last 3 for Silva. So, yeah, I could definitely see this one ending inside the distance. I do think people often are too bullish on laying, chalk onto overs in WMMA as well. Because in this case, there's a huge age disparity, too. So I think there's a couple reasons to think there could be a live finish. in either direction. But I'm favoring Natalia Silva. I think she gets the job done. And honestly, I just think her grappling has gotten substantially better from the time she was on the regionals. I think against Bleda, she kind of bided her time. And, when you look at Bleda, her physicality is no joke. She's a very big girl for the division. And I think she leveraged that, spent all of her gas doing it. And that's why she inevitably got finished there. She was kind of fighting unsustainably, using a lot of physicality. So I'm not sure that Andrea Lee could do much better in the wrestling and grappling, frankly. But we'll see. We'll find out Saturday. Next up, we've got a fight where I've been going back and forth on this one, gentlemen. So I'll kick it to you guys first. But I'll tell you, my gut here was that I have a notebook, right, where I kind of just at the beginning of the week where there's really not even props out on the domestics, I kind of just go through the bet online menu, start writing things down that look somewhat interesting to me. And I wrote down Petroski KO1, Meerschaert sub 2, Meerschaert sub 3, because I just feel like those are the stereotypical ways I'd look to play a Meerschaert fight. Like, he is a guy that can be knocked out. He's a guy that has, a really suspect chin. It was one thing getting one punch by Chimaev. It was a whole other thing getting one punch by Ian Heinisch, right? So it's like, you got to definitely take that under consideration. And it's starting to compound as well, the damage. He's had like 50 pro fights. He's been around forever. So that's a concern for me. But skill for skill, I just think Petroski is a good grappler, very good. But he's not like head and shoulders above somebody like GM3, who's a savvy old vet and who normally stays really dangerous late into fights. A lot of times it's not the things that are, technical about the grappling that he uses to finish the fight. It's the fact that he hurts you on the feet when you're not expecting it, when you don't think of him as a dangerous guy, and he starts wailing you with body kicks when you're tired and he's not. And he's done it to Deron Wynn, and he's done it to Trevin Giles and a bunch of other guys with that round 3 stoppage. Dustin Stoltzfus, he's like minus 225. Everybody's like, how can he be favored against him? And it's because the round 3 comeback is inevitable, right? He's like Thanos in that way. So I think that Gerald Meerschaert's a guy you got to kill, or he'll stick around and make it a really tough fight for you. Petroski's a guy that can park it on top, right? He's a heavy guy. He's got a lot of musculature. Maybe he does that here. But I just feel like both of these guys, pretty violent individuals, and Gerald takes risks. He's willing to go reach for a Kimura, do something that'll expose bad position. So there's a reason that he's got a lot of wins by sub and some losses by sub. It's been a while, but he definitely gives up bad positions if guys are going to be aggressive, finish the fight. So, yeah, that's how I'm kind of leaning. Is I might play some props here, but I don't think I'll be too heavily invested because I've been looking to fade Petroski in the past, but I also thought it was insane. Like when he was plus 325 against Nick Maximov, I played that for a unit, and I tell the story every time. It's my biggest regret that I bet $5 on the N sub 1 at plus 2,500 for what's his name for Petroski, because I was like, Maximov's going to shoot right into like front headlock situations from the outset. And then he shoots into the first one and gets choked out. I was like, God, I wish I had bet, a full unit there and retired for a couple weeks, gone on a little mini vacation. But in any case, boys, we'll kick this over to our guy Jewish bettor. Do you feel like betting on this fight? Do you feel like there's any value, or are you passing here, brother?
Yeah, I like the Petroski. Sorry. I like the Petroski side, though. Not going to lie to you. I think his jiu-jitsu is better. I think he's the younger fighter. I don't want to overthink this spot because I get into these spots like Gerald Meerschaert. He's done it so many times, right? The thing is, I think Silva came into that fight looking like the worst absolute version of himself, gave Gerald Meerschaert a good win. Muradov gave him a good win on his resume, but I just think the older he's getting, 30, I believe he's 35 now. Like you said, 50 fights, the damage is adding up. I don't think he has the best chin. Not just that he doesn't have the best chin, he leaves it hanging in the air for it to be clear right there as they plays jiu-jitsu a little bit too much off his back. He does have a dangerous guillotine, but Stoltzfus was able to take him down. I think Petroski's going to be able to take him down. I actually think he's going to knock him out probably in the first round. Maybe a sub because he does have a dangerous front headlock game. I believe that's what he caught Maximov with as well. That's at a Cesar Gracie Philly. So sub is live as well. He rocks him. GM3 shoots in, and he finishes him. So I'm going with Petroski. I like inside the distance. I think a lot of people are going to be on Meerschaert. I don't blame you, I guess, if you're taking him as a dog, but I'm actually completely disagreeing with it. And I think the younger Petroski is going to get the job done here.
Yeah, he's teammates with Piper, right? Like they're kind of just like looking at it like, hey, go out there and do the same thing your buddy did, And Petroski kind of commits all the way to his strikes, right? He's not a very judicious striker. Most of the time he comes out there and whales shots. And then when he's on the ground, he's trying to slice you open with elbows. He did TKO Michael Gilmore in the third round. Michael Gilmore, not a very good fighter, but still, in any case, does show he can go out there and finish fights with strikes in the UFC. So, Dravey, my brother, how do you feel about this one? Any betting value to be had?
Yeah, I did take a shot on GM3 here. I got plus 225, so I beat the line on this one. And like you said, Liam, I think it just has to be done. I took the round 2 and round 3 sub. I took like an insane number. I got plus 1200 and plus 1500 for the round 2, round 3 sub. I just think you have to do it because I think Petroski is the rightful favorite. Like, I understand why he's the favorite. He's gonna be winning the minute for sure. And also he can GM3 can die in the first round. That's very possible. I'm gonna live with it. But as the fight goes on, I think Petroski get a bit sloppy with his takedown, and he tend to give up his neck a little bit. And I think a guy like GM3 he's known to be able to capitalize on these types of mistakes. And I don't think Petroski's striking is all that. Like, he was getting outstruck at distance by Gilmore, by Thurman. And yeah, he does have power, but I don't think his striking is very good. And I honestly, the GM3 fight against Muradov, I thought his striking looked good. Like, he was piecing him up a little bit before he got the finish. And yeah, the Silva fight too. But like you guys said, I think it's fair to say that Silva didn't look good on the feet in that fight at all. So I'm not taking too much into that one. But the Muradov fight, his striking looked good to me. I think he has sneaky kicks, and also I think that like GM3 knows to be able to finish fight late when people get sloppy and does mistakes, and I've seen Petroski do that. And when he gets tired, he's the type of guy that he's able to recover, and then he's gonna be all right in the third round. But when he tried to to take his breath on the ground, I think that's where GM3 can catch him at some point. So I did take it based on value. But like I said, I understand why Petroski is the favorite. I think he's going to win the minute. So, yeah, and I think he's live for KO as well. But on the feet, I think if Petroski is not getting a KO early, I think it's a fair fight on the feet, to be honest. And, yeah, I like GM3 here, plus 225 and round 2, round 3 sub.
I completely agree. And a point that I make on stream a lot, and I get some pushback on this, but I think if you go back and watch the tape, it's borne out. GM3 has no defense, right? That's why it's always harrowing watching him fight on the feet, because he's like here, right? And his reaction time is nil. So he just gets hit with shots when his hands are like this. But when you look at what he does offensively, it makes sense, right? He's like a Henry Hoof fighter, right? He'll throw calf kicks, he'll punch you in the face with straight punches, bop, bop down the middle, and then he'll throw big, booming body kicks that hurt people, that mess people up. Like, Muradov is a guy that he likes to have this, like, set a pace, go out there, touch, and finish you in round 3. And it got interrupted, right? He could never get into a rhythm. Every time he started to try and load up on shots, he would get hit with a big body kick from Gerald, and it would tax his cardio, it tax his energy. And then a guy who likes to move around and be mobile couldn't do it. And a guy like Petroski, he's a big energy fighter, right? He does a lot of big actions, big movements, holding on to guys tightly, and it works very well. He's very effective with that. He can definitely knock out Gerald Meerschaert in the first round. But I do think that he's a guy that, because of how powerful he is, because of all the muscle systems that he's using, he can tire out. And we've seen guys like that pay many times against Gerald Meerschaert. So I just wouldn't sleep on GM3's ground game. It has been around the UFC for a long time for a reason. So I think it's a honest fight, especially if it gets out of the first round. But it's going to be a scrap. In the early going, I do favor Petroski to win round 1. So if he's alive after round 1, you'll probably see me with a live bet on Gerald Meerschaert. I'll tell you that. Because I was willing to bet Hu Yaozong based on the fact that he was a bigger guy. And I was like, maybe he can make it competitive late. And, of course, in that fight, he has no idea how to wrestle, right? But it still went to the third round. Against Michael Gilmore, it still went to the third round. So Petroski's not always out there just eliminating people. And I feel like you let a guy like GM3 hang around, you're begging for an accident. So banana peel could be there. And a guy like Petroski, like we said, against Maximov, he's plus 325. Now he's back to minus 225 against Gerald Meerschaert. Just market's a very fickle thing. Next up, guys, we got the fights that I have the least to say about right now, which is Cody Gibson taking on Brad Katona in the tournament championship for the Ultimate Fighter. I'm not a reality TV guy. This is not really for me, but it's for, the casual fans. They got drawn back in by McGregor. Shout out to him, right? If he was even at the show. Then Michael Chandler, he was holding it down in Vegas with the guys. So I think that this is a fight where Brad Katona, going for his second Ultimate Fighter win, it would be, some history there. So something interesting on the line. Cody Gibson's a guy who's always been on the precipice of getting some big wins, but can't really seem to close the show over 15 minutes in some of these harder fights. The Ray Borg fight comes to mind. So he's a guy that's got talent, no doubt about it. He's a big enough guy for the division too. But it just seems like he's a guy that struggles to get out of his own way a little bit, especially in bigger fights. So Katona just seems like a guy who's probably going to grit out a greasy win here and not look like tremendous value, but end up getting it done. So that's how I feel about this fight. I don't feel like betting on this one either. Let's kick it to my guy, Dravey. How do you feel about this one, brother?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't have a strong read about the two tough fight. I did watch a couple tape, but nothing too much. Like I did watch the Katona and Valiev fight, and that was a good fight. I thought he lost though, but that was a good fight, and I think he's tough. He has good striking, and I think he's gonna bring the fight. I actually think that's gonna be a good fight. But yeah, I think he win the fight, but just I don't like the line because I think the fight's gonna be close. I'm probably gonna go to distance, and I feel like it's gonna be a close fight. But I still think Katona probably is gonna win the fight. I think he's the better striker, and I think he's also younger for sure. And I think he's just better overall. But I don't have a very strong read, and I'm not passionate about laying the juice here. But I'm gonna pick him to win. I guess he's gonna win a decision. But yeah, it's not my most passionate take.
Yeah, and the other thing is 4 losses by sub on his record. When you look at a guy like Brad Katona, I remember he briefly took Hunter Azur's back in the UFC. So he's a guy that could leverage some grappling potentially. He's not a really lethal finisher, but it just seems like Gibson's a guy that can make some critical mistakes in the grappling. How do you feel about this one, brother? Our guy Jewish better.
Oh yeah, baby, all good. Dravy, let's get the gravy. Dravy, that's my new one. Dravy, let's get the gravy. You got to start using that, my man. So, I like this one. You guys are some casuals, though. You got it. This is McGregor versus Chandler, dude. Come on, man. Y'all are breaking my heart here. No, I'm just playing. I love this season, though. I actually watched every single episode. Maybe I'm the casual because it's not the best show anymore, but I enjoyed the fights. So let's talk about Cody Gibson. I believe in his first fight, he went up against both prospects, if I'm not mistaken. So he had a little bit of an easier path on the show compared to Brad Katona. But he's a large bantamweight who, pre the Ultimate Fighter, I believe in his fight versus Francisco Hernandez, I believe the guy's name, if I'm not mistaken. I was
Francisco Rivera.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And I went back to watch that fight. He was getting dropped in that fight. He winds up getting the finish, I believe, late. But there's certain fights like the Ray Borg fight where he can't get up off of his back. I believe he's a wrestling coach in his spare time, so his takedown defense isn't the worst. But once he's on his back, he doesn't really do anything to get back to his feet. He depends on guillotines, and I don't think that's the best formula versus a smart guy like Brad Katona, who's going to look to implement grappling at some point in this fight. So I believe Katona is the rightful favorite, but early this line was a little bit wide. I believe it was Gibson plus 185, and just due to his physical stature, the 7-inch reach, he's got some momentum coming off the show with 2 finishes. Sometimes, that could be there. But we also got to remember, I believe he did injure his knee on the show. I'm sure that's all patched up by now. But you never know. That could affect him, especially an older guy at that age, right? Dude, I would dog CM Punk, bro. I'm fucking that dude up. Fuck out of here, man. What are we talking about here? What are we talking about, guys? I'm going to spin him like a dreidel, light him up like a menorah, and then break him in half like some matzah. So that's on from that. But no, in all seriousness, man, I think Katona has the smarter IQ. And Gibson was trying to get in his head, but he seemed a little bit emotional, in my opinion. When you fight emotional, it could sometimes go against you. I think this fight's close. I believe it's going to go to decision, maybe even a split decision, because I don't really think Katona has the submission threat. He can get a submission, but Cody's jiu-jitsu and defensive jiu-jitsu is good. He just doesn't do a good job of getting back to his feet.
He submitted Bryce Mitchell, all right? He submitted Bryce Mitchell.
Yes, sir. I do remember that one. Old fight, but yes, I do remember that one. Katona could get it done, but I don't see a finish in this spot unless Cody Gibson gets him early, because he does start off really fast. That's one thing I will say about Cody Gibson, and he was able to get those 2 finishes on the Ultimate Fighter really quickly. Although, maybe Katona didn't beat Valiev. Who knows if Gibson does as well, right? So at least he was able to get to the decision. and the job was done there. So grappling advantage for Katona. I think he uses that in this fight to get the job done. If you bring me down to like a -125, I'll take it. First Ultimate Fighter winner ever. They'll say maybe Cody Gibson fought Aljamain Sterling in his debut, but I asked you about this and nobody knows. They'll probably say this is the first time 2 Irish fighters won on a card because we already know what's going to happen later in the night. So
Well,
that's what I gotta say.
I'll tell you, there's definitely been nights with multiple Irish fighters winning. Paddy the Hooligan Houlihan, Cahal Pendrin, all the
But
boys
when was
rolled
that?
through in Dublin.
That was like
It was in Dublin, and
2014.
it was a long time ago. Yeah, absolutely.
So they could say that. They could be like, man, it's been 7 years since, or even longer, 10 years since that happened. Crazy.
I hear you, brother, for sure. So we got a little narrative basis as well, but in my opinion, it's not a great bet at the current price, but like you said, if it continues to come in, maybe that opens up some value. Currently best available -160 over on BetMGM for Brad Katona, +152, the best comeback on FanDuel for the Cody Gibson side here. So with that being said, folks, let's move along to this next bout. Closing out the Ultimate Fighter conversation, we got Kurt Holobaugh taking on Austin Thud Hubbard. And this was a fight where just on instinct, I felt like I would either be on the dog or passing here. You know, I've never been an Austin Hubbard guy. He got the win over Roshkov. That's a good win. You know, I felt like that was quality at the time. I know that that's a quality wrestler, but the Vince Pichel loss, you know, the Joe Selecki loss, the Mark Madsen loss, he just doesn't do very well when people want to proactively wrestle and grapple him. I think as a striker, he's pretty meat and potatoes, pretty basic. I don't think he's going to blow people out of the water there either. So he just seems to me like a very average all-rounder type of guy, and he's tough. You know, he brings that to the table. You know, he's a gritty fighter, I guess, but to me, he just doesn't blow me away in any one category. So the idea of betting him as a favorite is just not something I would really be inspired by. But curious to hear how you guys feel. So we'll kick it to my guy, Jewish Better, first here. How do you feel about this one, brother?
Yeah, man. When I went and watched the Lee Hammond fight, man, Lee Hammond had that one in the bag, man. But like I said, off a failed submission attempt is when you're most susceptible to getting submitted yourself. And I believe Kurt Holobaugh caught that guillotine. He likes to depend on that guillotine a lot. He even said it right at the end of the finale. He said, "Man, I'm gonna stand there, ball with him, and if he takes me down, I'm gonna try and guillotine him." Like I said, like with Cody,
Man
guys like
after
Cody,
my own heart, I must say.
yeah, but in this game, man, you can't depend on that guillotine all the time, man. I think if Hubbard's gonna try and win this fight, he has to mix in the wrestling. Hollabaugh, man, in his next fight versus Jason Knight, absolute fucking banger of a fight on the Ultimate Fighter, and Jason Knight's defense was just nowhere to be found in that fight. Kurt Holobaugh just fought a little bit smarter, but come on, give those guys both a contract after that one. I don't even give a fuck who wins this fight. And that's kind of the whole thing with the Ultimate Fighter now, which doesn't make it as interesting. Like half these guys are probably going to get a contract in all reality at some point. So I can understand why most people aren't watching it, but the fights have been pretty good this season. And that Jason Knight one was not an exception. That was a banger. But Kurt Holobaugh, I think, is the older fighter here. So if I have to go with the side, I think it'll be the Hubbard side. But at this price, I can't bet it. I need him to come down just a little bit more. Holobaugh, I believe, was at the same price as Gibson earlier in the week, like +185. Got bet a little bit down, so some people saw some value on that side. At this price, same as the last fight, I think it's a stay away spot. But if I have to lean aside, it's the younger guy in Hubbard. I think he could use the grappling to take advantage of Holobaugh, and that's what we've seen in the past. Looking at his fights, so that's my read on this fight. Nothing strong, no bets for me.
Fair enough. And yeah, to your point, 36 years of age for Kurt Holobaugh. So it's kind of now or never for him. But again, with Austin Hubbard, you know, I just feel like even if he wins the Ultimate Fighter, I feel like he'll be out of the UFC in 5 fights. You know, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. It's just like looking at how it went last time, you know, the UFC doesn't tend to do guys like him many favors, right? So what'll it be? It'll be whoever the most hammerish grapplers they can find on the roster are again. So
be a hell of a story for Kurt Holobaugh too to come back after all these years. I mean, he's a veteran, so.
And he was going to retire, and then they were like, "Come on, the Ultimate Fighter," and he started, you know, slam-oing people. So yeah, I think that you know, he's an interesting underdog here. How do you feel, Dravy? Are we out to lunch, my brother?
Yeah, again, it's not a fight I have a strong read on, but I think Hubbard's probably going to win the fight. But man, he starts slow in some fight, and he tends to fight close against almost everybody. And I don't want to lay juice on someone that fight close with anybody. And I don't see finishing upside, to be honest. I think both of them are pretty tough. So if anything, I think fight go to distance is a good look. But yeah, if Hubbard mix in the wrestling, I think he's gonna win the fight. Probably gonna justify his price tag. But I don't think he's all that. Like I didn't like his fight in the UFC, and I don't really think he's UFC caliber, to be honest. So, but again, he's the younger guy. I think they both have very good cardio, but I think he might have better cardio, and he also have wrestling upside, I think. So I have to favor him, but I don't like the price at this number. It's -175, I think. But fight go to distance, you can get like -125 on some books. I think it's decent, but it's not a fight I really want to get involved in. Because like if you look at Kurt, he's about to turn 37 in only 3 weeks. And yeah, I don't really like that. I don't want to bet go to distance and then boom, you get finished, you know. So I'm just gonna pass on the fight. As far as the pick go, I'm gonna pick Hubbard to win a decision. But yeah, again, it's not a fight I'm gonna die on.
I feel that, brother. For me, probably going to end up passing here, but if I get onto his side, it'll probably be the underdog here. I know that he's turning 37, but I just think that if somebody got finished in this fight, I would expect it to be Hubbard. You know, and I could be crazy for thinking that, but I just feel like Holobaugh is a more dangerous fighter from everything I've seen. So I'm going to do a little bit more due diligence, certainly before I part with my money.
I'm getting attacked right now by a bug. I gotta. This is crazy, bro. He's
Yo, take care of what you need to, brother. No worries. We'll hold it down.
Yo, he's gone. He's gone for now. Yo, that scared the heck out of me, man. I'm sorry about that, guys. He tried to kill the Jew. He tried to pull a Hitler, but it didn't work this time.
Wrong, bro.
Oh, goodness gracious. I'm glad we're still on the rails here. We've got a fight that is fascinating next up. It's Gregory, Robocop, Rodrigues taking on Denis, Tiuliulin. And Tiuliulin is a guy where, you know, he doesn't project to have the highest upside in the UFC. They've kind of given him a murderer's row, save Jamie Pickett, right? They gave him the Jamie Pickett fight as like a, sorry, we brought you in to get beat by Kizriev. And then after that, you know, it was right back out of the frying pan and into the fire, right? They give him Jin Young Park, and Jin Young Park is a guy that is definitely beatable if you can keep it on the feet. But if your susceptibilities of the grappling, the wrestling, you know, he's a real problem for you. And even on the feet in his last fight, he went out there and broke Durayev's nose with the jab, you know, a minute and a half into that fight. So he's getting better in all positions. Definitely a dangerous guy. And you look at how they both dealt with that common opponent, you know, it went way differently, right? On the other hand, Gregory Rodrigues was able to get the knockout against him. Granted, it was a close fight. It was back and forth, but you could tell that his grappling is what made the difference there, right? Jin Young Park wasn't able to exploit him, so he had to do the fight on the feet. He spent a bunch of energy in that fight, and then he was the one that ended up falling first in a fight where Gregory Rodrigues is, you know, he's there to be knocked out every fight, right? Like if you guys go back and watch tape on this guy, it's incredible that he hasn't been knocked out more, right? Because he gets hit cleanly in every fight. He looked like he was out against Chidi and Jikawani. Like, number one, the fact they let him go back out there with a hole in his face, you just know that somebody on the athletic commission had a Gregory Rodrigues ticket in their pocket, right? Because this dude literally had no face from like here to here. Just like a box where you could see his veins and stuff coming down his face. It's one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen. But then on the other side, he can knock out any opponent, right? He's standing there throwing hammers at people's head. He's not afraid to get hit back. And if somebody's throwing a leg kick, for example, he's normally countering with like a two-piece combination where he's trying to take your head off. He's knocked out UFC level guys like Josh Fremd, put him out badly, put out Jin Young Park, who's a top 15 guy. So he's definitely capable of knocking out anybody. But then Bruno Ferreira, I mean, guys, that's one of the most insane knockouts you'll see. He kind of like whiffs on the first left hook, makes him think he's going with the right hand, and then goes with the left straight. And Robocop never saw it, and he was out before he hit the ground, right? I think the follow-up shot missed, and he was still out because he literally like punched the floor, and Robocop's still like rolling around on the ground. Like it was a bad knockout. That was 6 months ago. He's getting right back in there. It's a favorable style matchup. I considered playing the Robocop sub 1 at plus 390 because I'm a glutton for punishment, right? And I like having my heart broken. And I feel like Robocop one more time for the culture, going to go out there and probably not use his ground game and get knocked the hell out. But I just think that if he's smart here, he does have some grappling upside. I don't think his wrestling is great. That's the one concern. I think a lot of people are super bullish on his wrestling. And his wrestling to me kind of looks hit and miss. He's good at catching kicks. He's good at like disrupting people that are trying to strike with him. But there was a couple times where I saw him reach for takedowns that never had a chance, like not a hope nor a prayer. He's a little slow, right? On the feet, that's why he gets hit cleanly sometimes. His reaction's a little slow. And there's times where he's constantly walking forward. So he becomes very predictable. And there's guys that were like Bruno Ferreira at a certain point was like, oh, this guy's just going to come forward and swing at me. So if I move backwards, I know that I can line him up for stuff. And then when he got his feet back to the fence, he was like, okay, now it's time for me to head move and swing. And he did, and he knocked the guy clean unconscious. So I was like, that's a little bit concerning because Robocop doesn't really know how to fight another way. Like he comes forward, gets in people's face, makes it a crazy war. And most of the time it goes his way. But it just seems to me like if he does that against Tiuliulin and he doesn't take it to the ground, the minus 300 is going to look insane because this guy in most of his fights, it's just rock 'em, sock 'em robots on the feet. So for me, that's the huge barrier to entry here. Also, he's coming off a massive knockout loss. I just don't love it. I feel like the under was my lean here. Whenever I see two guys that are really susceptible to making catastrophic errors that finish the fight, I always lean towards the under. It's like minus 180 chalk. I didn't feel, compelled to play it, inspired to play it. But if I was to get to a bet on the fight, that's probably where I'm leaning here. I think Rodrigues sub is what happens here. But do I feel great about it at the chalk? I don't. Dravey, how do you feel about this one, my brother?
Yeah, so I'm gonna be with you on the Robocop sub, Liam. I didn't know the line got smashed like that. I got plus 265. It's plus 140 right now. Like I like it at plus 200 or more, but man, I would not play it at plus 140 to be honest, because yeah, Robocop, we know him at this point. He's like I had Chidi by KO when he fought against him. That was bad, bro. And I would do that bet again.
They robbed you.
Yeah. But yeah, like Robocop, I think he's kind of a weird fight because one fight he's pretty tough. He took like big shots and then he just got knocked out by like a sloppy shot against Ferreira. That was not a big punch, but that was at the right place, So, but yeah, dude, in this fight, I think that in this striking, it can be close, but I still favor Robocop. But dude, one takedown, and I think that's the fight. If he doesn't get a takedown, I think that's just stupid because the grappling upside, the advantage on the ground is just so big. Like Robocop grappling is so high level, but I don't understand why he's not using it in the UFC. Maybe just because he loves to strike, but then he just got KO out cold. So is he really gonna love to strike at that much? Maybe that's where we're gonna see his grappling choose. And I don't think Denis has good takedown defense. I think he's very bad on the ground. So I think he only need one takedown and he finished the fight. So if he go out there and he strike with the dude and get KO, I mean that's his problem. I can't fight for him, But the sub prop when they open it at plus 265, I thought that was a crazy number because of the advantage he has on the ground. So I had to take it, but I just saw plus 140. I didn't know that got smashed like that. But I think, like you said, Liam, the under 1.5, also I think it's a good look because, yeah, if Robocop lose the fight, he's going to lose by first round KO, let's be honest. So, yeah, but I think one takedown, that's the fight. Just be smart. Please do it and get that sub, Robocop. That's a bounce back spot. The UFC gave him a spot. Like, you can take that guy down easy. You get the sub. You get the bounce back. Here it is. So if he's not taking it, I mean, I can fight for him, But I just had to take that bet.
Absolutely. The other thing I'll add is just that I like the under in part because I think Robocop is a really dangerous ground and pound guy too. Just rewatching the Chidi fight, he was like, F this. Like as soon as he got to the ground, and Chidi's a black belt too, but he just like passed into a dominant position and then he's like controlling a wrist and just ground and pounding the shit out of him. So he's a guy that he'll take whatever kind of finish you present and he's a violent dude. But I like in the interviews that he's pivoting, right? And then he's talking about, listen, I'm going to go out there and go for the sub. I think people underrate sometimes what interviews mean. It kind of just gives you an insight into where the fighter's head is at. it doesn't mean that you should believe them every time, right? Some fighters aren't trustworthy. But when you go out there and listen to a guy say, listen, I got knocked out in my last fight, so I don't want to get knocked out anymore. And I prefer to go out there and use this skill set that I had not been using recently. It's like, yeah, that's exactly what I want to hear from the guy if I'm going to bet the sub prop. And the market has responded accordingly. So good on you, brother. You got CLV out the wazoo. Jewish better. How do you feel about this one?
Yeah. Under is sitting at 1.5, if I'm not mistaken, not 2.5. So a little bit interesting, but that the book's doing that for a reason, right? I think if Tiuliulin's smart, he's just got to come forward and try to brawl with this guy. But in doing so, he could give up the setup for the takedown. Robocop's doesn't have maybe the best wrestling, but he does have good trips, good inside trip. He could get this fight to the ground, and like my boy Dravy, get the gravy said, that could be it. It could be a rap. Rodrigues is a black belt. The only thing I don't like about Rodrigues is sometimes, especially on the back, he'll get up a little bit too high. People can shake him off. But Tiuliulin, 35 years old, I'm just not sure he's making improvements. Already been submitted twice in the UFC, and it just kind of feels like we're due. We haven't seen that Robocop sub in a little while. But with the crowd being loud, crowd get loud, baby. Like you said, big Brazilian population. Maybe this could be another Brazilian guy, but I just don't want him to listen to that crowd. He needs to take this fight to the ground where he has the advantage here, because if he doesn't, that minus 300 price tag does look absolutely buffoonish, just like it did in the last fight. So learn your lesson. Don't bet him money line. Don't put him in your parlays, because that's just a foolish decision, especially with him coming off a knockout loss a few months ago. And if one thing Tiuliulin does crack, he can hit hard. He has the power to put people out. So you have to be weary here taking the favorite. This is a complete pass spot for me, but I'm going to look into the under 1.5, because I think if Gregory Rodrigues isn't going to be able to get those takedowns, even either one of these guys is liable to get knocked out. There's not saying that Robocop couldn't take his chin as well. Tiuliulin isn't the best striker, and I think skill for skill, Rodrigues is just a little bit better. So I'm going to go with the under 1.5 here if I have to take any lean or bet, but nothing in for me yet on this fight. Stay away from Rodrigues, though, in that parlay. You're mashugana if you bet him.
I hear you, brother. When you look back, that loss via TKO was all the way back in 2013 for Tiuliulin. So really his main vulnerability has been that submission throughout his career. He's just not good on the ground. Even when he's getting beat up on the ground, he doesn't know where to go to be safe. So he gives up his back. He puts himself in worse positions sequentially. And that's how you get advantageous jiu-jitsu angles. You know, somebody else is giving up bad positions. So I just think that that's a huge concern here. And I am expecting a Robocop sub, but to your point, I just don't want to lay the chalk here. Robocop's caught you with your pants down a couple times if he did that, so you don't want to do that here. Next up, Chris Weidman taking on Brad Tavares. Speaking of volatility and unknowns, we got Chris Weidman. Asked me if I bet him in his last fight. It didn't go so well. That one was over before it started, huh, boys? But when you look at this fight, he's a big plus money underdog here. He was a pick him in his last fight against Uriah Hall, but that was a different situation, right? Now he's been out of the octagon for quite some time. He came back to a grappling situation where I didn't think he looked himself. I didn't think he looked very good. But granted, that was, pretty soon post-op. He's a guy that's working his way back from major surgery, just getting back into shape. He does look like he's in incredible shape, right? The pictures I've seen, it's remarkable. A guy coming off that kind of surgery has put in all this work. So it's admirable. It's inspiring. Am I going to part with my hard-earned money to support the dream? I don't know if I can, but I also don't think I can lay chalk with Brad Tavares. I mean, listen, I've bet on Brad Tavares before. I've never lost a bet on Brad Tavares on the money line. I bet Duplessis. I bet him against Akhmedov and ACJ, because I've always said about Brad Tavares, he's one of my favorite anti-grapplers in the UFC. He does a lot of things that are small little details people don't pay attention to. Right. He controls wrists. He forces people when they're on a single leg to defend strikes. He'll start punching you right in the face. Like, he just has good balance and good fundamentals. So most people have a really hard time out wrestling Brad Tavares. And that instantly makes me go, damn, like, why'd they give Chris Weidman this fight? But I think it's for a number of reasons. I think it's because Brad Tavares is not really a known knockout artist. He does have some power in his hands. He's a striker primarily, but he's more of a point striker most of the time. He normally will fight you to a competitive decision where he'll land some shots and you'll land some shots and he'll take his turns and you take your turns. He's not really a guy that overwhelms people most of the time. So I think that's why they gave him this fight, because they don't want Chris to get instantly overwhelmed and hurt in the early going. I still think that's a possibility because he's 39 years of age. He's been knocked out 6 times in professional MMA. His chin has been gone for quite some time. He's absorbed a ton of damage. But the one thing that could be good about the injury is that it could refresh his chin a little bit. He hasn't been taking the damage, not in the training room and not in the fights. So, I do want to take that into consideration. You're normally not seeing Chris Weidman prices a plus 225 underdog point blank period against anybody in the UFC. So that's something that I'm taking into consideration as well. I can't lay the price with Brad Tavares. I just wouldn't do it at any point in this, but I don't know that I could get there with Chris Weidman either, given all the concerns about the injury coming back here at his age. His record in Boston, not so good, right? Got knocked out brutally by Dominic Reyes in his move up to 205 pounds. So I'm curious to see how this one plays out. We'll kick it first to my guy, Jewish Better. Do you got anything on this one, brother? Or are you passing on this fight?
Yeah, I think Tavares is the side, but at the same time, I just don't know what version of Weidman I'm getting here. So I think this is going to be Weidman's retirement fight, most likely. I don't like to bet on guys who are probably going to retire in their next fight. We just saw it, a few times this has happened, and I think it's not dog or pass, man. I don't think there's a way you could really get to betting on a 39-year-old guy coming off leg surgery and when last fight threw a kick and completely just blew his leg. We have never seen anybody really come back the same from that leg
Brad
injury.
Tavares did agree at the press conference not to check the first leg kick, so they have a
Yeah, you
gentleman's
better
agreement.
check it.
They're each going to give each other one free kick.
I don't think I don't think his leg's going to completely blow out, but I just think this is a farewell party for him. Tavares, like you said, I think his wrestling defense is good. I think on the ground he's, maybe if he does get taken down, it's going to be a problem. But he did face Antonio Carlos Jr. I do believe he was able to survive there. So Weidman would have to get 2 takedowns and then on top of that hold him down. And I just don't see him doing that at this age. He's in close fights with Omari Akhmedov years ago. I think Tavares is a little bit a level above that. Trains with guys like Sean Strickland, etc. at Extreme Couture. And I think his coach, Nick Stick, will have a good game plan for this fight against Weidman to defend the grappling, keep it on the feet, and then outstrike Weidman, who's never been the best striker in the first place anyway. The thing he's most known for is catching Anderson Silva while he was doing some BS. So I'm going to go with Brad Tavares in this spot. I think he's the rightful favorite for a reason, but I'm not going to lay the chalk on a minus 300 favorite in this spot. But
I actually think WW is right here. I think on the feet, Weidman would have absolutely washed this guy when they were both in their prime. And I think Tavares has actually been in the UFC longer than Chris Weidman. But when you look at Chris Weidman, he came in as like a stud prospect. Dude, if they had matched up when Weidman was 8-0, he would have absolutely washed Brad Tavares in my view, because he was one of the best at what he did, right? He was an elite wrestler, whereas ACJ and these guys are kind of like mid-tier versions of that. And all I will say is Weidman looked like he was completely past it against Kelvin Gastelum, but then he found the magic. Like, his grappling is insane, right? At its best, he was an elite world-class grappler. So the idea that he couldn't out-grapple somebody like Tavares in spots is a little bit, to me, where I'm like, I think number one, on the feet, he's got some power in round one. It's just that his fundamentals, he can't take a punch very well, right? He could be up 2 rounds and then get brutally knocked out, as has happened to him several times. So that's why he could never be favored here, but it does make it somewhat interesting as a dog shot in my view. But I do think low T is probably hitting the nail on the head here. I wish it wasn't so, but he could just be done here as well. It's about the opponent as well as everything else. Kind of like Nico Price and Robbie Lawler. The UFC picked just the right guy. Like, they found exactly the right guy to match up with Robbie Lawler to give him a chance, and he went out there and maximized. So that's a UFC legend, a guy they wanted to do right by. You know who's of the same ilk, of the same era? Chris Weidman. And I don't think that they're trying to get him embarrassed in the first round. That Uriah Hall matchmaking, probably hindsight 2020, they would like that one to do over. But Dravey, how do you feel about this one, my brother? Any value to be had on our guy Chris Weidman, or is this an out to pasture fight?
Yeah, sadly, I don't think there's value on Weidman. I think the line is justified on Tavares. I parlay him at minus 250. I think that's a good line. I think like he's around minus 280 or something. I think it's a correct line, just because if you just look at the matchup in general, Weidman's a very good wrestler, a very good grappler, right? But like he's fighting someone with elite takedown defense, like you mentioned, Liam. Tavares takedown defense, balance, that's elite. And then you watch the tape, you watch the people that have been fighting. Tavares just fought Duplessis. He fought a war with him. Duplessis was not able to take him down, and that was kind of a close fight. Don't get me wrong. Duplessis is about to fight for a title. Like he clearly won the fight, but that was still a close fight, you know. And yeah, I think Weidman's washed, sadly, and now he's coming back after a 2-year layoff where he needed to learn how to walk. I think it's important to mention after that, man, that was a nasty injury. But yeah, that's still like there's not many people that's gonna be able to come back after something like that. But then you add the fact that he's 39 at the end of his career, and if you look just at the resume, he only has 2 wins in 7 years. I mean, yeah, he didn't fight for 2 years, but still, I think that Tavares, I don't think it's a good matchup for him just because of the takedown defense aspect. And I think he's a better striker. I think he's more durable at this point. And like you said, I don't think Weidman has a good chin anymore. And I know Tavares not known for his KO, but I think that's a spot where he can get one. I think he has finishing upside in this fight, to be honest. And yeah, I think he's able to keep the fight on the feet, where he's the better striker. And I think he might get a KO probably late in the fight. And yeah, I don't like Weidman coming back. I thought that was a good plan to retire after the last fight. And now he's training. He's trying to come back, and like chin issues, legs issues, age, and yeah, even before Liam, just before the layoff, everything before the all fight against who's that guy name? I don't remember. Omari, right? Even in that fight, he didn't look good. That was 3 years ago, and now at 39, I don't think he's gonna look better, you know. So yeah, I think Tavares is the side here. At first, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna pass on this fight, and then I look back, I watch the tapes, I'm like, dude, that's a good matchup for Tavares, and yeah, the age and everything. So I did parlay him at minus 250. I think it's a good fight for him.
Yeah, and I understand that to a degree as well, right? There's a world in which Weidman goes out there, gets hit with one punch, and he gets knocked out, right? Because he's an older guy, and he's a guy that his chin has already been washed, right? Like we were talking about, he doesn't have a great chin, and I think that's why they gave him Omari Akhmedov, right? In that fight back in the day, I think the Uriah Hall fight they gave him because they thought he could out wrestle him. But I do think that they like a guy like Weidman well enough. So I think they're trying to give him the closest thing to a winnable fight they can. It's a tough situation for him, period, to come back from that injury, to be his age. He's talking about world titles and things that sound a little bit insane, right? But I also just think that for him, in terms of how you motivate yourself to get back from an injury like that, it's hard to put yourself in those shoes. And so I feel like just getting back to the octagon is important for him. Making the walk is important for him. So maybe that's going to be enough. And the result isn't really as material to him. So we wish him the best of luck here. If you guys can detect any biases, we got that New York bias in our blood. And Chris Weidman, one of the best to ever do it. He's in the New York record books for wrestling and everything else. So shout out to him. God bless him. We wish him the best, but it's a different thing parting with your money. So I'm not confident enough to do it. I'm not confident enough to tell you to do it. Next up, Marlon Chito Vera is going to be kicking off the main card. So I want to ask the 130 people rocking with us live, drop a like on this video if you have not already. Get subscribed to the channel and make sure that you go in that description box below and you show some love to our guests. Make sure that you follow their great work that they're doing. We really appreciate them making some time to talk about this card. Now, let's break down the main card, folks. We've got in this fight, Marlon Chito Vera, 10-2 as a UFC favorite, taking on Pedro Munoz, 5-4 as a UFC underdog. Both these guys have been profitable to bet on the money line throughout their career, so it's understandable why this is going to take some two-way action. I know why people are coming in on Pedro Munoz as an underdog. He's delivered in that spot. He's given you a good return on your investment. He went out there in his last fight and delivered as an underdog against Gutierrez, and I bet on him in that spot, plus 180. I felt like that was a winnable matchup for him. I felt like it was a very good matchup for him in a lot of ways. I feel like this is a tougher matchup, right? Against a guy like Chris Gutierrez, he doesn't really like being pressured. He could be out grappled. And in that fight, I felt like I expected almost a little bit more from Munoz, right? He went there, he landed a huge switch stance left hook, knocks him down. And then he just looked very muted in his offense from the top position, right? This is a guy who's got Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu credentials out the wazoo, but he's just sitting in a closed guard and then eventually stands up out of it, without really accomplishing all that much. So I feel like his top game is not that effective right now in MMA in the modern meta. And I feel like a guy like Chito has a pretty developed game off of his back. So the way to beat him is normally to take his back, to neutralize some minutes. You look at a guy like Jose Aldo, that's how he did it as well. Look at how he started to handle that fight down the stretch where he was realizing, wow, I'm about to get outdone on the feet. So I need to take this guy to the ground, put him in a back body triangle. And Chito's so mad because he's like, wow, I could beat this guy if I was on the feet right now, and I'm stuck here and I don't know how to get out. So his frustration is just like him throwing punches over the back shoulder and whatever. But that's Jose Aldo, a guy who is, by the way, criminally underrated in his ability to do jiu-jitsu in MMA. Nobody ever talks about it. He's very, very good at Brazilian jiu-jitsu, world class. So when you look at a guy like that and you look at what he did, and then you look at how he treated Pedro Munoz, that was not a competitive fight at all. He completely washed him on the feet. He outboxed him. And at the end, Pedro Munoz said, "Oh, legend, I have so much still to learn from you." He's a guy that's had a long career, and on the feet, he doesn't have that many tools. He looked uncomfortable. He looked shocked that he landed that switch stance left hook, to tell you the God's honest truth, against Gutierrez. Like, he was kind of looking lost on the feet. He does a good job with his low kicks. He does a good job swarming people with big power hooks if they're standing in the pocket. But he doesn't do a great job of tracking people down, in my view. I don't think that he's the best pressure fighter in the world. And I think that when he used to pressure more aggressively, he took a ton of damage. So I just don't know exactly what to expect from this fight. But going back and watching the O'Malley fight, he looks good there. But it's also like O'Malley just not doing anything, right? Like O'Malley's kind of just watching traffic in that fight. He's just standing there feinting, but never really committing because he's getting kicked in the legs and he kind of didn't know what to do to draw out his reactive counters. So I think he landed at like 1-1-2, but he didn't really do anything effective in that first round. Then they came out for the second round. He kind of started to land a little bit, poked him in the eye, and the fight was over shortly thereafter. So that fight, I couldn't really get a good beat on either. When I look at Chito Vera, he's a guy I've cashed on a lot of times on the way up. But then that last fight was a real letdown spot, right? Where I thought he was going to beat Corey Sandhagen or at least make it an honest scrap. I just felt like he's a guy that comes on strong late. I felt like Corey kind of was slowing down a bit against Jan in the later portions of that fight. And I just felt like it was going to become a really competitive fight down the stretch. And he just never found his way into it. Again, another guy who used length, size, wrestling to take him to the ground and outwork him there. But I just don't really see that from Pedro Munoz very often. I don't see him attempting very much wrestling. I don't see him trying to get on top. He gets on top by incidental contact, right? He goes for guillotines on reaction when people shoot bad takedowns on him, but he prefers to keep it standing on the feet. So I like Marlon Chito Vera to get a win in this fight. I feel like he is the side. I didn't bet it, but I'm definitely going to look at some of the prop markets as well. I think nobody expects, or I think very few people expect a finish here. You look at this price, it's very chalked out to go the distance, but you've got a guy who's like 36 years of age and Pedro Munoz, who's eaten 1 million strikes in his career against a really dangerous finisher in Marlon Chito Vera. So I don't know, man. I feel like Chito could definitely storm on him late. And I would probably look for a Marlon Chito Vera round 3 or decision type of prop. Cause I do think Pedro Munoz, tough as a $2 stake, but he's a guy that I think will slow down a little bit over the course of the fight. And I think Marlon Chito Vera, the opposite is typically true. And I think a lot of people love him over 5 rounds, right? But I feel like he never got started in some of those 5-round fights because he was kind of nervous. Whereas I think in 3-round fights, he comes out so aggressive by round 2 and round 3 that he really brings a pace and pressure to opponents that they don't like. So I feel like Chito's going to get the win here. Dravy, do you think I'm crazy? What do you think, brother?
No, not at all. I think you're pretty spot on. And that's a fight where I look at the stats. Just if you look at Vera, he's a slow starter, give up the first round, and that's a 3-rounders. Oh, he's a big favorite. Oh, might be value on Munoz, Probably going to be a decision. So, yeah, that was my first thought. But, man, let me tell you something. Chito does, like, when he take damage, nothing show on his face. Like, there's nothing on his face. But he's doing damage a lot in his fights. Like, ask Baby Grant. Like, the third round of that fight was a beating that was crazy. And Munoz, he was getting caught in the face by Dominic Cruz. He was getting hit clean by Dominic Cruz and caught, you know? So I think the difference in this fight is that first of all, Chito, yeah, he's pretty much he's younger, like he's 30 years old, and Munoz 36, but in 3 weeks gonna be 37 at bantamweight. I think it's important, and like you said, he took a lot of damage in his career, and he has a very good chin. Don't get me wrong, but I see some spot people landing clean on him, and he doesn't have the best striking defense. But he tends to leaves himself open in the pocket, where I see Chito being able to land some elbows, and he really loves to do that in the pocket. I just believe in general he's the bigger guy, he's the younger guy, he has more tools on the feet, and I think I favor him a lot as the fight goes on. Maybe he's gonna drop the first round, that's possible, but I think he's gonna either win the next two, or I think he's very light for a finish. My first thought was I'm gonna parlay the go to distance at like minus 200 or something, and then I see the odds. I'm like, bro, what is going on? Like now the go to distance is what, minus 300 or something. I think it's a bit crazy with a guy like Vera, who's a proven finisher. Just because they have never been finished doesn't mean it's not gonna happen here. Yeah, so I think Chito has the finishing upside. I don't see wrestling upside for either side. I think that's going to be a striking fight, but I'm very confident in saying that if there's a finish, it's going to come by Chito. And I'm also very confident to say that he's going to be the one doing more damage. So let's say it's a decision at the end. The judges rate the scorecard. One of the guy he has the face in blood, and the other one has nothing on his face. They're going to give him the rounds, you know. And also, if we talk about narrative, the UFC wants Chito to win. So I think he has like everything in his favor to win that fight. So after reviewing the tapes and watching everything, minus 200 I think it's fair. I think that I decided to parlay it. I got like minus 999 just to say I didn't get minus 200. So I did parlay him with Brad Tavares. It gave me plus 110. I thought that's a good parlay. And yeah, I think that's a good spot for Chito. So yeah, 7 years younger, bigger guy, finishing upside, more damage. That's what I want.
Yeah, and he's, again, been very profitable as a favorite, over a 30% ROI. So I think that there's a lot to like about Chito. And, you know, the things that I've liked about Pedro in the past, I just feel like most of those wins have come against some of the lower level guys or guys that weren't quite at their prime. Like a Rob Font, I feel like would have a much more competitive and honest fight with Munoz today than he had at the time with him. Got clipped to the body, panicked, which he has gotten a lot more calm and poised in the octagon. But at the time, he panicked, went for a takedown, and got guillotined by the best guillotine in the bantamweight division. So I want to give him that credit as well. In terms of if there was any way he could finish Chito, I would only envision a guillotine. I don't see it any other way for him. But he does have a money guillotine, and from one guy who likes a guillotine to another, salute. His is very good, and he does full commitment, right? Like most of the time when he goes for a guillotine, he ends up in the mount because he already has it so locked up. And that's a guillotine that is high percentage as opposed to one where you end up finishing on your back if it doesn't work out. So Jewish Better, how do you feel about this one, brother? Do you like Pedro Munoz, or do you think Chito Vera gets it done for a unanimous panel?
Yeah, great points from both of you guys, man. I do like what you said about Chito as a favorite, because I heard you say earlier, man, he let me down in the Sandhagen fight. Somebody else in the comments said that as well. Like, you know, I hope he doesn't let me down again. You guys got to remember, he was an underdog in that spot. He's not supposed to win, you know, on the statistics in that spot. He's favored not to win in that spot. But as a favorite, I believe his ROI was around 28% when I did the math. But I was doing it for the opening line, so you could probably be way better than me at those numbers. So I'll take your word for the 30%, and that's a good number. But if you look at the Munoz side, 6-3-1 as an underdog, and he's also been profitable in that spot. So just to counter that thing, the one thing I will say about that is realistically, we got to think statistically, is that sustainable? Like Chito as a favorite, that might be more sustainable. He's supposed to win those fights. How long could you keep continuing to win as an underdog, especially as the age goes up? Are we going to see a little bit of a regression here? And I think this is a good spot to see some of that regression. And as you said, everybody really kind of thinks this fight's going the distance. Pedro Munoz super durable, but one head kick and he's able to finish Dominic Cruz. He's able to finish I believe Frankie Edgar with the front kick right to the face. I could see him landing a head kick here and putting Pedro Munoz's lights out clean. It was a few fights ago. I think I was there for this fight versus Jose Aldo, where after the fight, Munoz was saying, man, maybe I should move down to flyweight. And if you're saying that versus a guy like Jose Aldo, I think a younger guy like Chito Vera is going to take that blueprint, come at you strong. He's going to get his reads early on, similar to O'Malley, but once he gets his reads, it's going to be a rat, fellas, and it's going to be Chito show by KO. Let's set up the O'Malley fight, win or lose. And that's what I'm going with. Now, the thing is with Chito, right, is he does lay on his back a little bit too much. But Munoz isn't a wrestler here, guys. Chito all the way. I'm with you guys all day.
Yeah, we all agree on this one. And just to point out, I was AV on Sandhagen last time out because, I think that was a very good matchup for him. But I don't see Munoz being similar to Sandhagen. I don't think he can do something like Sandhagen did.
Yeah, I agree with you. We've seen Corey Nurmagomedov his last couple of fights, right?
Yeah.
Like coming out here, shooting a million takedowns, trying to stay on top. And Pedro just, if he did that, God bless him for it. It would be something that we could never, expect because he just doesn't try that very often. So the one thing I'll mention here is I do put together a document every week where I break down, the likelihood of fights ending by different methods. And right now, the bookmakers have it 75% to go to decision here in this bantamweight scrap between two dangerous finishers. 22% chance that it ends via KO and 12% chance that it ends via sub, according to the market averages here. So you guys that are math whizzes, you'll know that adds up to over 100, but it's because they've got VIG baked into these futures markets. But it's just something to keep in mind. I always like to pay attention to that. And the odds makers not favoring a submission almost at all here. To your point, Dravy, about it's probably going to be a fight that plays out primarily on the feet. So KO or decision is how the bookmakers have lined this in terms of their expectations. But let's move along to the next fight here. A fight put together on very short notice, right? Making the quick turnaround after he secured I think it was just the third twister finish in UFC history. I feel like the twister is a move that you should not be getting caught with in the UFC. It's a little bit more of an indictment of the defensive player more often than not. I mean, it's not to say that it's impossible, but just to say, how did he get caught in that? He made a huge fatal mistake, himself. Like Damon Blackshear, if he had gotten him with a rear naked choke, it would have maybe been jiu-jitsu superiority, but it was literally the guy throws a back elbow and puts himself in a submission. Like, you can't help people like that. But in any case, I had thought that was going to be a Blackshear subber decision. I just felt like he had a path to, lasting longer in that fight. He's a guy that has never been finished in pro MMA. Really impressive. He's been hurt before. So it's not like it's impossible to envision, but he's a guy that has a really comprehensive ground game. So he's kind of difficult to get out of there if you hurt him, if you get him on the ground. He kind of has safety zones on the mat. And I feel like in this fight, I don't feel confident that Mario Bautista is going to have a grappling advantage here, and he's a big -200 favorite. Let me check the exact odds here. I don't want to speak out Miars. We're looking right now at a -225 on Mario Bautista, +188 is the comeback here on the Blackshear side. And yes, this guy is cutting a bunch of weight. Yes, he's coming in for a second fight. Yes, it didn't work out for Lupi Godinez. I feel like this is a completely different matchup, right? Lupi Godinez made that turnaround, fought up a weight class, right? And then she had success in round one. She just couldn't sustain it deeper into that fight. Luana Carolina ended up outlasting her a little bit on cardio. Whereas I think Damon Blackshear, he has pretty good cardio overall. And Bautista is a guy that has struggled to put it together over 15 full minutes in the UFC. Beating Jay Perrin over 15 doesn't tell me much. I'll just be honest with you. So then I'm like, okay, he's not finishing Jay Perrin. He's finishing a bunch of guys quickly. Doesn't tell me all that much either, except he's going out there and handling the job accordingly. He's definitely getting better. But then the loss to Trevin Jones, it's like, that just doesn't strike me as a guy that should be a -230 favorite in this fight. Against a guy with a clear chin liability who looks like he's on an absolute regression in Garbrandt. Okay, I understand that. But against a guy who's never been finished, who's potentially the better grappler here, I don't know. I'm not seeing as clear an advantage for Bautista as a lot of people seem to see here. So I'm going to do a little bit more tape, but I was watching tape on this before we came on the air. And, I felt like Bautista looked good, not great. He's getting reversed by, what's his name? Guido Canetti on more than one occasion, right? He ended up reversing from bottom side control and then getting on his back. And it's just like, you're getting put into bottom side control by Guido Canetti. 43-year-old Guido Canetti's putting you in bottom side control, and you're expecting me to believe that you're minus 225 against Damon Blackshear. It just seems a little feisty to me, but I'm curious if somebody feels differently, and y'all can make a case for our guy Mario Bautista, because he is a fun fighter, good prospect, on a great run. Momentum's definitely on his side here, but I don't want to discount Damon Blackshear. I've done that a little bit in the UFC. I picked Luan Lacerda. He beat the hell out of that guy. So I just feel like on the feet, he was a little better than I gave him credit for. And on the mat, he just ran Jose Johnson like he was a nobody, right? Like a guy just making his UFC debut, but a guy that has a ton of professional experience. And he treated him like he was a nobody. So I was impressed by that performance. Dravey, how do you feel, brother?
Yeah, I think it's a good fight, man. I'm not so sure I want to bet this one, to be honest, because like we have Blackshear on only a week notice, double weight cut, so I think it can affect him. And the line kind of reflect that, because like you said, I think both of them are very good grappling. I think Blackshear might be the better wrestler of the two, but I think they're very high level on the ground. And when you have these type of fights, they tend to strike, right? So I think I would not be surprised if that's a striking match. And on the feet, I do favor Bautista. I think he's the better striker overall. I think he has more volume. I think he has better cardio. And I love the way he goes to the body. I think he's very high level on the feet, just as a fighter in general. But dude, man, Blackshear just made me some money last week, so I don't really want to bet against him. I got in I think minus 170. That was a smash spot for me. I just thought that Johnson takedown defense was just too bad, and that Blackshear's gonna be able to capitalize. But I was not accepting a twister. Let me say you that. But yeah, I'm gonna take it. And yeah, I think I had a very good read on Blackshear in the UFC. I did bet against him for I did bet Zalal in his debut. That was a draw. I did play Basharat AV in a parlay, and I sweat that one because I thought Basharat will finish him with body shot, because I think he's a little bit weak to the body. If you look at the Zalal fight in the third round, he slowed down a lot and he get hurt with the body shot. And then I watched the tape on Basharat, and he has good cardio and he has good body shot. I'm like, oh, all right, that's very possible. And then that fight was closer than I expected. And now people saying that Farid is not as good, just because Blackshear is better than what people give him credit for, I think. And then I didn't bet the Lacerda fight, and I did bet him pretty heavy on Johnson. So I never lost a bet on him so far, and I don't think I'm gonna bet this fight, because I can see Bautista winning the fight late by TKO with body shot, because I think it's possible we see Blackshear slow down, especially because of the double weight cut, the short notice, if we can say that. And I already seen him slow down before in the third round. I know Bautista's not gonna slow down, and he goes to the body. So but I think the fight will probably go the distance. Both of them are pretty tough. Blackshear has never been finished, and if it goes to distance, I think it's gonna be a close fight. So as far as the money line goes, I think it's dug or pass clearly, but I don't really want to bet on this fight. As far as a pick go, I'm gonna pick, I think, Bautista to win decision, maybe a late round finish, but I think it's clearly dog or pass. I saw the line was dropping down on Bautista. It was like minus 170 at some point. I was hoping to get minus 150 or something, so I can up on it. But minus 225, I think it's a little bit too high, so I can play that. I think there's some value on the dog, but there's just some unknowns that I don't really want to get involved in.
I feel that, man. And I don't think that we have full props on this fight, so that's something I'm going to wait and see when they come to market with those. I think we should have on U.S. domestic sports books, I'm talking about especially, we should have a little bit more data to compare, because I did put together a spreadsheet for all the fights on the main card, but this is the only one where I had literally zero data available, because it's a very unique market, right? The fight ends via method market. It's very specific. It's limited to fewer sports books, and so that's why I think you can get an edge. You can kind of read the market a little bit more clearly that way. And unfortunately, I have zero to contribute in that regard for this fight. But what I will mention is just that Mario Bautista, I wanted to make the note that he got knocked out in the Corey Sandhagen fight, and then he also got submitted in that fight. But people will forget, if they don't go back and rewatch the tape there, that Corey hits him with a flying knee, looks at the referee and goes, seriously? And the ref's like, go ahead, like keep going. So then he goes down to the ground, beats him up some more, puts him in a like a reverse triangle. He just did everything he wanted to him in that fight, beat him up. And so that's a brutal UFC debut, can definitely hurt your confidence, whatever. But then he gets a win under his belt. You're like, all right, now he's gonna show us his best stuff. And Trevin Jones knocks you out. I mean, Trevin Jones, I like the guy, and I thought like, oh, he's turned a corner. No, he just knocked out this guy. Like then it kind of all fell apart, right? He knocked out Timur Valiev as well in a weird fight. But I don't know, man. Like Trevin Jones kind of just never showed it again in the UFC. So you're like, was that just a blip on the radar, or is this guy a little bit fraudulent, right? Because he's had the most cupcake fights in the UFC. Am I wrong? Like Benito Lopez hadn't fought in 3 years, looked like he didn't want to be there, showed up overweight. Like I wasn't really super impressed by that win. And then Jay Perrin, guy who's been cut from the organization, lost to an 18-year-old after, like working himself up at the press conference saying, I'm going to kill you and whatever, like absolutely like freaked out in that spot. Brian Kelleher, guy I like, right? We already said New York in the building, right? But when we're talking about Brian Boom Kelleher, he's a very small guy for the division, right? Very stout, a little bit older, guy who's dealt with a lot of injuries. He's been out of the cage for a little while now. How well are all these wins aging? Guido Canetti, cut from the organization, 43 years of age. So I think Mina Bey hits the nail on the head here. Bautista has a suspect chin. To your point, we might have a suspect body on Damon Blackshear, but I think we got a suspect chin on Bautista, so I'll call that a wash. In the grappling, I would slightly favor Damon Blackshear. In the wrestling, I favor Damon Blackshear. So unless his cardio drops off a cliff here, I feel like I'm going to have to take an underdog shot here on Damon Blackshear. And I didn't, I haven't been a Damon Blackshear believer, but how many times am I going to ignore the data points in front of me where I thought Luan Lacerda was going to have something for him, and he didn't. And I thought that, Jose Johnson, maybe he could grind it out to a decision, but he just looked so much higher level and more aggressive and more confident in these fights recently as well, where in some of his past fights, he'd get to good position, but wouldn't try to assert himself. I feel like now his confidence is at an all-time high. So 2 guys, 2 hammers, all-time high confidence, plus 185. Give me that. What do you think, Jewish Better?
All right, well, I got to go outside, and I'm standing here at the door, and I got to go outside because I got to smoke a bowl, man. This is getting ridiculous, and there is the bug right there. So I'm going to give you guys a flip camera angle if I can. We're going to stomp this mother effer out, New York style, with the Timbs and the blue socks. So here we go. Wish me luck, guys. This thing is huge. Look at it. You see it?
I do see it.
You see it?
God. Oh, God.
All right, brother. Here we go. Oh, that was nasty, bro. All right. Bye-bye, buddy.
One for the human being.
Oh, that was gross.
Oh, my. This is the stuff, though.
He had to go, though. He had to go.
Program?
He was trying to take out the Jew. You can't do that. Not in 2023. Almost forgot what year it was. But all right. So in all seriousness, I had some pretty good reads on Blackshear. I took him last time out versus Jose Johnson. I thought he was going to have a major grappling advantage there. Absolutely clowns him with the twister. But this was just a week ago, guys. So he's going to be fresh in these bettors' minds. And I think he should be getting a little bit more love, like my man Liam said. The last 3 guys, I guess Kelleher you would assume as the best grappler. The thing I do like about Mario Batista is he always is looking to get back up to his feet. He's not really looking to play jiu-jitsu. He's always fighting for the top position. And I think that's going to get him into the right spots to win this fight here. I just think the line's a little bit wide in all seriousness. And the reasoning for that is the finishes on the Batista side, regardless of level of competition, it's still there. And on top of that, the short notice aspect of it for Blackshear. But we've seen Blackshear lose fights earlier in his career. Actually went to draw with Zalal, but he has good cardio, but he can't keep the same pace, obviously, for all 15 minutes. He does start a little bit stronger than he finishes, which is fine. I think he could if this is at catch weight, man, then that's even better reasoning to take Blackshear because the short note. So no, okay, that would be more reasoning to take Blackshear.
I wanted to let people know.
But that could scare some people off, man. And I do see Blackshear as a live underdog here. I haven't placed a bet on it yet. But, man, he's won me 2 bets in a row. Why don't I get on top of this guy and just do it again? Pause. Yeah, big pause. But I'm going to go with it.
It was his birthday last week, right? And I feel like he was the one that made this call, right? Like, hey, can you guys put me in again? I don't think the UFC would make this ask, right? They would probably just try and get some regional guy. And he said, yo, put me in, coach. And I think he's going to take the ball and run with it, to tell you the truth. So, yeah, don't be surprised if you see me with a Damon Blackshear bet. Haven't bet it yet, but if he looks okay at the weigh-in, I think that line is going to go and just drop off a cliff, personally. So, Mario Bautista minus 150. Okay. Like based on all the things that we know coming in here. But again, I always try and look at it probabilistically, and I don't see some huge advantage. I don't see some massive hole in Blackshear's game, and a durable guy never been finished. You know what? I have to give him a little bit of trust and respect here. So that's what I'm thinking of, but tricky fight nonetheless. Let's move along to the next one, guys, because this is where it all gets interesting. We've got drama at the press conference. We've got everybody, going to war with each other in the comments section and everything like this. But I'll just keep this one plain and simple, and pass it off to my guest first because I have a stronger opinion here. I got biased as shit opinions here as well. So I'll acknowledge that up front and kick it to my guy Dravey for a unbiased opinion off the rip, and then we'll go back to myself at the end.
Yeah, I think it's a smash putt for Gary, to be honest. We know what Neil Magny is at this point. He's a gatekeeper. Like, he's going to beat the guys he's supposed to beat. And that's why it's cool to bet him, because you know who's going to beat and you know who he's going to lose to. Like, of course, Shafkat's going to finish him. I saw your ticket, Slam. Good job on this fight. And but I think Jan Gary is very good, but people love to hate on him. Like, people love to fade him. I saw a lot of people on D-Rod, for example. And then you just have to admit the kid's improving from fight to fight. He's improving a lot, man. And I think that's a fight we have not seen his grappling yet in the UFC. But if you guys watch the regional fight, he has very good grappling. And we know Magny tend to do mistakes on the ground, where I think it can be a sneaky sub spot for Gary in this one. But on the feet, I think he's faster. I think he has better footwork. I think he has more power. He's also younger. He has the momentum. And he called for this fight. I think it's important to mention. He said, "I want Neil Magny." He knows what's up. That's a fight where he can finish. He can look good in. I think so. I think he's very smart in what he's doing. I think that the Neil fight was tricky. I think maybe he still could win this fight, but the Neil Magny one is the easier one. I don't really see what Neil can do. Maybe he can grapple. Maybe he can hold him to the cage and do some volume strike, but I think Gary's going to touch him at some point, and Magny will want to take him down. He will want to clinch. He will not want to stay on the feet with Gary, I don't think. And we know what Gary's weaknesses are. It's that he has a suspect chin, and that he kind of get hit in the pocket at time. But is Neil Magny the guy to put him out? I really don't think so. He's not a finisher. And we know that when Neil Magny lose, he more often than not get finished, right? So I think that's a fight where Gary will look good. He will win by finish. And also Neil Magny is on short notice. Gary had a full camp. He's ready for this. So what I did here, I did parlay Gary early at minus 330. I thought that was a good line. Now it's minus 500. I think minus 500 is a little bit too much for me to get involved. But at the early price, I thought that was a good line. So I did parlay him at minus 230. With Silva that we talked, Natalia Silva we talked earlier, minus 150 for the double leg parlay. I like that, but I did play the inside of distance. I think they opened it at around plus 130, so I saw that line. I'm like, that line's gonna move pretty quick. I hop on it. I think it's like minus 170 or something now. Again, that's not a line I like at the moment, but I also did play the sub prop at plus 650 because I just think the number is wrong. And it's like plus 300 on Bet Online, but there's 550 and 650 on other books. I just think it's pretty wrong. So I do think that's a spot where Gary will look for the sub. And he said himself in interviews that he's going to be looking for it. Like you said, we don't take for granted what fighters said, but sometimes it's important to listen what they want to do in the cage. And Gary is a guy that so far he did what he said is what he will do. So yeah, I think he's going to get the finish here, and I have a lot of exposure on him. I normally don't do that, but I have him in a parlay money line, minus 330, the inside distance, plus 130, and the sub prop, plus 650.
You absolutely crushed the line movement here on the inside the distance, man. I mean, I was really strongly and still am really strongly considering, but I don't have access to the book yet. So I'm looking around at my options here, surveying where if I could get a better line in New Jersey, for example, I would consider doing that. But in any case, I was looking at the minus 135 on the ITD here for Ian Gary. Let's talk about this fight, right? I have made a lot of money fading Neil Magny. Right. It's been a system play for me for a while now. And it's not every time, right? I didn't bet Phil Rowe. I picked my spots with guys like this. But I've been betting, sub props and fighters against Neil Magny for a while. And I bet 8 units on Shavkat Rakhmonov at minus 400 against him, a teammate of Ian Gary, a training partner and sparring partner of Ian Gary, by the way. But in any case, you look at a fight like this and you say to yourself, what does Ian Gary bring to the table? Well, he's younger by 11 years. He's very smart in how he approaches fighting. He has a developed underhook game. So he knows how to circle off the fence. He knows how to deal with people that are trying to put his back to the fence. From what I've seen on tape, he's been dealing with it his whole career, right? Guys have been trying to do this to him from back. I saw one of his split decision losses on the amateurs. A guy did this to him the whole fight. And frankly, I think they got that decision dead wrong. Because if you look in that fight, to your point, my brother, he had 2 submissions fully locked in, but they were at the end of the round. So the guy saved by the bell. And I have screenshot evidence if y'all want it, but I go deep on my research. And when I went into the research on this, I thought to myself, have I been, just making donations on Ian Gary's sub props? Because I bet them every time in the UFC, right? And he hasn't gotten it yet. Or I should say, I bet it the last 2 times in the UFC and he hasn't got it, right? So that frustration, was definitely there. And I was saying to myself, should I go back to the well here? But then I look at it and it's like, I have a system play on Ian Gary by sub that hasn't paid off yet. But then I have a system bet that has been one of the most profitable bets in my history, which is fading Neil Magny by sub. So it's like, it's the collision of 2 worlds. How can I not take a little bit of Ian Gary by sub? Frankly, though, I think that there's some fundamental misprices on this fight in a couple of different ways. Let's talk about the ends by sub, which is a very similar price. You talked about the fact that Bet Online, very sharp sports book, holding a plus 275 on Ian Gary by sub. Did they open at that number? No, sir. They opened plus 600. They have been nerfed down. They've been slowly nerfed down. They were down at plus 325, down to plus 300 to 275. They keep going down, right? And I noticed that. And I noticed the fact that most sports books on domestics in the U.S. are offering the ends by sub at a better price than you can get Gary by sub on a very sharp sports book. So these are the kind of long-term lessons I try and share with people on the show. Always look, why would I take one guy by sub if I can get both guys by sub at the same price, right? And that's what yesterday, FanDuel, and I looked at it and didn't bet it. It actually came and went off the screen, but they had opened a Gary, and maybe this was 2 days ago. The days are all blended together. I've been doing so much research, but in any case, they had opened like a plus 750, I think, on Gary by sub. And then they opened the fight ends by sub plus 600. And I'm looking at both of them. I have them both in my bet slip, right? And then I'm just doing my due diligence because I didn't want to fire before I did my research. And I'm researching. I'm like, wow, everything's checking out. Bet Online's checking out. And then I go to bet it, and it's dropped in the thing. I was like, no, I let the opportunity pass me by. So now I don't think you can do better than a plus 510 on the fight ends by sub, but still, you've got a sharp sports book basically offering half the price on one side to win by sub. And do you think that Neil Magny is going to knock out Ian Gary? I would be fundamentally stunned if that happened. But would I be that surprised if he submitted him? I mean, I guess not. It's like if Neil Magny was to finish this fight, I feel like it would be a sub. So I think Ian Gary has some upside to cash that ticket. Most books, you're looking at plus 550, plus 600 or so for his sub prop now. So that's just one other EV lesson I would share with people. If you can get a price that's really fair, that's a good, fair market price on one fighter by sub, and it covers both outcomes. If you think the fight's going to be in the grappling phases, why not cover the other side if it's a similar price? And so, we'll talk about it in future fights as well. Another fight coming up where I always look for those kind of props because you can get way more value on some of those than individual method props as well. So I think we covered this one in pretty good depth, but overall, I'm Irish as shit. Okay, fade me if you want. It's all good. I'll forgive you guys, but I like Ian Gary in this fight. I did my due diligence. I did my research here. I feel like he's the better fighter. He's the much younger fighter. I think Neil Magny is a guy whose chin is deteriorating over time. I think his grappling is suspect at the highest levels. And I think that in his last fight, he was fighting somebody who's very similar to him, a very similar archetype, a guy who kind of slows down over 3 rounds, and a guy who fought a boneheaded game plan, and it was still a split decision. So it was still very close. It was within the margins. I feel like Ian Gary, he's a guy who's very responsible with his career management. Says, I don't want to rush to the top. I don't want to rush to the best, available, matchup every time and get the title shot right away. I want to slowly build my way into this division, 6-fight plan. He seems like a guy who's got a good head on his shoulder. So give me Ian Gary. I think he gets it done. I think he finishes Neil Magny via sub in the 2nd or 3rd round. And that's how I see it going down. So if he does, we're going to be having a red panty night at my house. You know what I'm saying?
I'm glad you agree, Liam, because, if you get that sub, it's going to be a good night.
Let's do it, brother. Let's cash one for the boys. That would be fire. So let's see what's next, my man. Zhang Weili, the first title fight of the night for us to break down. And shout out to our guy, Jewish Better. Seems like he has to get on the road. So appreciate you. Thanks for being on the show, my man. We wish you the very best of luck. And we will circle back with you soon for your thoughts on the rest of the fights. But in any case, we'll keep pushing, my man. We've got this co-main event, and it's fascinating. Amanda Lemos, dangerous girl, huge power, way above average for the strawweight division. But she's taking on another girl, powerful hitter herself, Zhang Weili. Zhang Weili has been one of my favorite fighters that, these are a tale of 2 fighters, right? That's how I put it on Twitter. On the one hand, I can't get a Zhang Weili bet right to save my life, right? I've been confident in her against Rose Namajunas. I took the plus money in the rematch. It just didn't work out. Okay, I learned my lesson there. But when you look at her overall, I feel like she brings a lot of good intangibles to the fight game, which is that she's tough. She wants to win. She could wrestle. She could grapple. She could strike on the feet. She can mix it up in all phases, and she can compete hard over 5 rounds, which we've seen from her in the past. So I think that that's what I like about Zhang Weili. That's what I like about her approach to MMA. She can kind of take a fight anywhere and win it there. She could be really dangerous and finish in the 1st round. She could go to war with Joanna for 5 rounds and get the win there. So I just feel like she kind of covers a bunch of different gambits. But at a minus 325, that's when you have to start asking hard questions of somebody, right? Then it's not enough to just be, oh, she's really talented. Oh, she's great. It's then, what is the problems? What could be the reason I don't cash a minus 325? Because we're talking about a very high level of indication. We're talking about a very high level of confidence. So on the one hand, what's her biggest flaw? I would argue it's her chin. I think that Zhang Weili is a great fighter, but I think we've seen examples of her getting buzzed by Danielle Taylor back in the day. We've seen examples of her getting knocked out via head kick in the 1st round against Rose Namajunas. Cost me some coins. So I'll remember all those things very vividly. But then on the other side, tale of 2 fighters, one fighter I can't get right. One fighter I've gotten right a lot of times. Amanda Lemos, right? I've had a pretty good read on her. I gave a huge donation on the Waterson fight. I bet Waterson by sub. Got that one backwards, huh? But in any case, right, that's there again is more evidence for my ends by sub prop. If you think it's going to end in grappling, make sure you cover both sides. But that's what I did last time out when Zhang Weili was fighting Carla Esparza. Felt like it was going to be a wrestling, grappling heavy fight. Bet a little bit on the ends by sub. Turned it into a great night there. So I looked at this fight and I said to myself, Amanda Lemos, powerful girl, does tend to slow down significantly over the course of her fights. The Angela Hill fight, argument it could have went the other way. The fight that she had, I think it was against Leslie Smith way back in the day where she got finished, she gassed out considerably in that fight. She swings hammers. She goes out there and throws power shots. Marina Rodrigues was one of the easiest matchups for her in the division. Not to say it was a layup on paper, but at a plus 200 price tag, you're getting her against a girl that's a primary striker that doesn't take anybody down, that has huge flaws on the ground, and that's been hurt in some of her recent fights, that was battered by Yan Xiaonan, and her face was messed up, and she didn't deserve that win, by the way. I bet Yan Xiaonan, I thought that was bullshit. So I feel like you look at her body of work, Marina Rodrigues was overrated. Amanda Lemos was underrated coming into that spot. But I do think in this fight, Zhang Weili just has more paths, especially down the stretch. I feel like she performs better later on in fights. I feel like if she wants to wrestle and grapple here, she's going to have an advantage. Amanda Lemos, I faded against Jessica Andrade to the tune of like 6 different bets. I got every kind of bet you could have on Andrade I was having that night. The -3.5, the ITD, the under, on rounds as well, because I felt like they were both very violent women. And I had I had Andrade by sub plus 600 that night. And Andrade submits her in the first round with that head and arm choke. I felt beautiful about it. But I'll tell you what, man, that reaction, bro. Arms up in the air. Like looking like she was seeing a ghost as she's being put in a head and arm choke standing. Dude, that's not good grappling, right? That's like really, really fundamentally flawed grappling. So I think Amanda Lemos on offense is a killer, both grappling and striking. She can finish anybody. But I think defensively, her flaws are so massive that she could get knocked out or submitted in this fight as well. So for me, my strongest lean here is towards somebody getting finished. Like I think that this fight is going to end inside the distance at a big clip for a WMMA fight, but the numbers suggest that as well, right? The numbers are priced accordingly. So for me, this feels like a fight where probably dog or pass moneyline pricing, but I feel like Zhang Wei Li is going to have her way with the wrestling. I think she's going to get on top, and I don't trust Amanda Lemos grappling from a defensive standpoint. So give me Zhang Wei Li by submission, my brother. So 2 sub props in a row, but that's how I feel. How do you feel about this one?
Yeah, I'm kind of mad they didn't open the under 2.5 at on BetOnline first. They opened it, I think, on DraftKings. The under 3.5 was minus 115. That was a steam. It's sad that I missed that one. But yeah, I think that with the numbers, that's a number game we play, right? I think Lemos decide. I did get in on her at plus 300, and I did buy back at plus 260 a little bit. Nothing too crazy, 1.5 unit total. I just think it had to be done just because if Whaley's not if Whaley's not successful with the wrestling heavy and early, I think it's anyone fight on the feet. I don't think Amanda Lemos, she's plus 300 against anyone on the feet. I don't think so. Like she has the power, she has the speed, she's big, she's strong, and Weili Zhang is very good. Like she's a very good fighter everywhere. But if you have to pick where she has some weaknesses, striking defense, and her chin is not, I think, very good. Not to say she has a bad chin, but I don't think her chin is very good. So I think that Lemos has finishing upside for sure. The problem is I think she has finishing upside for probably 10 minutes. I think that she tends to slow down into the fight. And Weili Zhang, definitely, she has the better cardio for sure. So I understand why she's the favorite. I think she should be. But I think the line is wide. I think it should be a little bit closer just because of the danger of both these girls. And like you said, Liam, I think the fight don't go to distance. It's a good play. I didn't hop on it because the line just got too crazy, I think. But I did take Lemos plus 300, plus 260. I think that there's value on the line. And I think she's very light for a finish early. But to me, it really depends on how Weili's going to fight it. Like if Weili came in, just shoot, I don't know, 5-6 takedown, I think that's going to wear on the tank of Lemos. And then if she doesn't get finished early, she's going to slow down, I think, earlier than she should. Because I've seen her in some third round and she looks all right. Like in the Rodrigues fight, she looked good. She got a finish in there. But that was a slow pace. I don't think this one will be a slow pace. I think that's going to be a banger of a fight. But yeah, I think Lemos can clip her at some point. I really do think she can do that. And also, maybe I'm crazy, but I think her guillotine is very good. I think it's a possibility.
I agree.
Like you said, fight M by sub. Let's say someone like Weili sub, like fight M by sub, it's definitely a better look. I think it's a good way to play it also. To me, I just think it's a fight. I will not play the props because I can see KO from both sides and I can see a sub from both sides. Of course, I favor Weili. If the fight goes late, she's a big favorite, deserve it. But I think Lemos gonna finish her in the first 2 rounds, bro, and that's gonna be a big upset, plus 300. But I think it had to be done because of her skill set. I think her striking is very good. Yeah, and like the 2 fights you talk about, the Taylor fight and the Rose fight, where she did get clipped, like we have seen this before. That can happen, and I think that's Carla Esparza is not gonna get a KO, you know. And after that, who did she fight recently? Like Joanna is not a big finisher either, and Rose is not a big finisher normally, but she did get that egg kick still. So yeah, I think Lemos should be live for KO or a sub. So I did have to take that number.
Yeah, man. And to your point, I always like to look at the past as precedent, right? Like I want to know how is the market done at evaluating these fighters, for example. And Amanda Lemos, 3-2 as an underdog, but if you bet her every time out, 68% ROI. So she's been paying off for you, especially if it's a long-term play. I bet her last time out as an underdog, right? And when you look at on the other side, Weili Zhang, 6-2 as a favorite, great record, 12% ROI. Right? Because she has cost you a couple times as a big favorite against Rose. I think she was minus 225 that night, got finished. So you've seen she's definitely capable of dropping the ball as a big favorite. And that's something you want to take into account here. However, she is the younger fighter in this spot by a couple years here. Amanda Lemos, 36 years of age, would be a little bit old for her to break through as a title challenger. But it's not to say it's impossible because she's been around the UFC for a while. She fought as high as 135 pounds, and she has pretty good, credible wins in the UFC. So even in fights where she struggled a little bit, like the Angela Hill fight, she was able to fight through for the hard 15 minutes there, showed a little bit of grit, a little bit of toughness. And I think she got caught pretty bad by Andrade, looked really bad in that spot, but I don't think that's a full indication of her skills. Like I said, as an offensive grappler, she's money. I didn't expect her to get Watterson. That was a great win by her. Watterson's not easy to submit. So I thought that was cool, but I also think that she is liable defensively in the grappling. So when I looked at this fight, you said the ends by sub. I want to just point it out. I did bet that, and it has dropped substantially, right? I always look at how these things are priced over the course of the week, and I saw that they opened plus 420, and it went up to plus 430 on FanDuel. And so I was like, I have to take that. And I bet it at plus 430, and FanDuel then adjusted down to plus 410. And I was like, okay, they're afraid of it. So then I went and I did bet it at another sports book as well. And now both of them are in the plus 370 and below territory. So it's been adjusted down significantly, whether it wins or loses here. I just felt like you're talking about women's MMA where KOs are less frequent. So you got two girls that are capable of it, but just by and large, I always like to think of like a theoretical standpoint. Most women's fights, they would assume a sub is more likely than a KO. But in this fight, you got two powerful girls. Both of them have shown willingness to submit girls in the UFC. Both of them 2 submission wins to their credit in the organization. So yeah, absolutely. Your point about the guillotine is spot on, my man. I think her guillotine is one of the best in women's MMA because a guillotine's about a grip and a squeeze. And when she squeezes, she commits 100%. And girls' faces start turning purple and look like their eyes are bulging out. So she's clearly got a great squeeze on her. Speaking of people with a great squeeze, we've got the main event to break down, guys. Aljamain Sterling, the champion, New York in the building. You know that we're a little bit biased for our guy. Also, D3 Wrestling, stand up, taking down Olympic champions, even exceeding my expectations. I was gutted with my own betting performance last time out on Aljamain Sterling because I said on Dan Levy's show at the beginning of the year, I went on, I did my predictions, and I had thought that Aljo was going to retire, win or lose, after the Henry Cejudo fight. That was my prediction. I'm dead wrong about that one, right? But we can look back at that and say, what did I say exactly in my prediction? I said, man, I feel like that fight with Henry could go either way. It's a pick'em in my mind. Then they release the lines, right? It ends up getting a pick'em price at close, yet I somehow get a Henry Cejudo ticket at minus 110. It looked like a pick'em fight to me. It looked like Aljo gutted it out, won the fight, deserved to get 3 rounds there. Maybe he should have been a minus 125, minus 130. Clearly, I got no value on Henry Cejudo. So my only other bet on Aljo was Aljo against Petr Yan in the rematch, plus 270. I bet him bigly there. I won 10 units. And for me, it was a fact that I believed Aljo when he said, I was not myself in the last fight. You look at the Petr Yan fight, and he looked weak. He looked like he couldn't grab a hold of him. He's getting muscled around, thrown around in the wrestling. I was like, that does not look like Aljo. That doesn't look like the Aljo I've seen on tape. It doesn't look like the Aljo that I know as a competitor. So then when he said, I got surgery and I feel better, he came back. He looked like a different fighter. He dominated him in the grappling and the wrestling early, took him down, put in that back body triangle, beat him up with the elbows from the back. I thought he looked like a dominant champion for the early going. But Aljo kind of has to manage, right? I don't think he's built for 5 rounds perfectly. So he has to approach fights a little different than some other guys. He'll try and win 3 rounds and then, kind of bank 2 at the end. It's just, I got to make it through these. I got to keep it close. I got to attempt a bunch of takedowns, keep this guy away from me, but really not try and win the fight outright. He kind of concedes parts of the fight to his opponent, or it'll just be a round in the middle of the fight that he'll take off, like against Henry Cejudo, and kind of not be as active, let the other guy get off a little bit, but then pick up the pack again later in the fight. So Aljo's a guy that's tricky for people to deal with, but I have seen a little bit of slowing down on the feet in my view. I think that the Pedro Munoz fight, I watched that for tape, right? Because Pedro's on the card, Aljo's on the card. It just seemed like a good fight to go back and watch. Then I realized how much younger he was at the time that fight took place. He's 34 years of age now. He's been around at the top of the game for a long time. He's dealt with a lot of injuries from early on in his career. And the reason I had some skepticism about the Henry Cejudo fight is because you look at a guy, and you say to yourself, he said for years, I want to retire at 33. I want to be done with my career, at a reasonable rate. And I want to, retire young. I don't want to take a bunch of brain injuries. I don't want to take damage for my whole life. And he was 33. I'm like, man, he's probably going to retire here, win or lose. These are old interviews, right? Now he's got plans at 145. Now he's in the fighter trap, right? Which is he finally started making money. He's finally a champion. He got to his goals and he doesn't want to call it now. But he's saying, this is going to be my last fight at 35, 99.9% sure, And so he's kind of closing the door on coming back to this weight saying, hey, I want to open up some opportunities for my guy, Merab. And there's a chance he could go out and close, the deal and go out there and get the finish here. But I do find myself marginally concerned by that, right? You look on paper, Aljo's a great wrestler, great grappler, but he does have archetypal losses that resemble this, right? You look at Marlon Moraes, comes out there, kind of bamboozles him with the feints and the fakes, gets him into a staring contest, kicks him in the head, finishes him there. And Aljo looked like he was reaching for it, got caught with it as it was coming up. Could you imagine something like that happening against Sean? I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. I think Sean's a dangerous guy. But I do think the more I look at this matchup, the physicality of Aljo is difficult to ignore. Because when he locks a hold of somebody, like Sean is one of these long, lanky guys. That's very effective for striking. But it can be, a detriment sometimes in the grappling. Not always, not exclusively. Some guys leverage their length in grappling. But when you see a guy like Aljo who's got that tight body triangle, it's going to be very hard for you to move inside of that. It's going to give him very long levers to grab a hold of, try and roll wrists in, control you, and then beat you up from on top. So for me, it does seem like Aljo has, opportunities to keep this fight cleaner, whereas Sean, I feel like needs a big moment in this fight to take it over, or he needs to, be very judicious with where the fight takes place, keeping himself somewhat upright against the fence, hoping for, a little bit of a greasy decision where he lands a couple more shots and keeps it close. But the way he fights, he's so constantly backing himself up towards the fence that it's hard for me to imagine Aljo, unless he gets finished early, will not be getting him into positions where he could shoot takedowns along the fence line. And we saw a guy like Jan, who's not the most physical bantamweight, I think is fair to say, pick him up, remove him from the fence, and then almost step into the full mount. So I can't watch that tape back and think to myself that Aljo couldn't do the exact same thing. Aljo did the exact same thing to Jan, especially when I look at these two guys matching up on paper. I do think there's a physicality edge for Aljo, but I think there's a speed edge for Sean. So my gut lean before any tape was that this fight was not going to go to decision. And I still feel the same way. I could see it, I guess, creeping over, but just the way these two guys fight, Sean tends to be all the way in and all the way out with his striking, where he starts to find people with the 1-2, and he looks like he generates a lot of power. He looks like his timing is really what throws people off, where he'll look like he's going to throw and then throw after like a 1-second pause and kind of catch people with the end of his left hand. He does that beautifully. He's hurt guys really bad with that, but Aljo is a student of the sport as well. I feel like he's going to come in well prepared, well studied. Coach of the year, Ray Longo in the corner. I can't deny my guy Aljo here. Got to ride with our New York brother, but I'm not laying the chalk either. I can't bet minus 240 against a O'Malley in Boston. I feel like that's a recipe for disaster as well. Great fight. People had asked me earlier this week, where did I think Sean was live in this fight? I feel like he's live early, and I feel like he's live late. I think he can catch Aljo if he slows down in this fight because he does tend to keep a pretty high pace. But I watched the Henry Cejudo breakdown, and he did point out he looked kind of gassed in that Jan fight at various points. Big deep breaths, and he would be proving something new if he's able to go 5 rounds with Aljo here. So fascinating fight, my brother, and I'm curious what a sharp mind like you thinks about it.
Yeah, thank you, brother. So I think it's a classic striker versus grappler matchup. If you just erase the name, erase for that, you don't know it's O'Malley and Sterling. That's a classic high level grappler versus a high level striker, right? But some of them, one of them is minus 240, and the other is plus 200. So I don't think I think it's normal that Aljo's the favorite. Don't get me wrong, but I did take some O'Malley at plus 240 and plus 235. I just plus 245 and plus 230. I just thought that there's value on this line because I think O'Malley by KO or starting by sub is probably the most likely outcome. It just whoever can fight their fight, you know. But I think the big cage does favor O'Malley. He does have very good footwork, and I think that he needs to be careful early. But I think that if Starting's not able to get him down early, I think he's gonna get caught with something. And I'm just gonna talk about the knees because remember when O'Malley caught Young with the knee? That was a pretty good
Best
one.
strike of the fight.
Yeah, that was the best strike of the fight. And Jan has a very good chin. But let me tell you something. A lot of people will go down with Danny. We know Aljo loves to go down with some knees. I'm just kidding. But yeah, if you watch the time he got KO by Moroz, that was by a knee somewhere similar. But man, if you watch Pedro Munoz, Henry Cejudo, and who else? And yeah, Peter Yan, they all landing some knee like that on Aljo, but they're not landing clean. But they're still landing, but they're all short. They're all shorter than him. Now O'Malley's gonna be taller, and I think the knee is gonna be a very good key to success because Aljo he has good wrestling. His wrestling I think has improved recently, but sometimes he gets sloppy with his takedown because he just wants to get to your back. He has a nasty body lock. That's one of the best part of his game. But when he gets sloppy with takedown, if he shoots from far away, I think O'Malley's live to catch him with a knee coming in. And at distance, I don't think it's close. I think O'Malley is very, very good at distance. The way he managed distance, his footwork, his accuracy, he's a sniper. I think he can catch him at some point on the feet. And I think the fight ends inside the distance more often than not. But I don't think it's crazy to think there's a decision in this fight. And like you said, I think there's very good point. People tend to think that if the fight goes to distance because Aljo winning for sure. I'm not so sure of that because yeah, first of all, who's gonna do more damage? It's gonna be O'Malley for sure, unless he's on the ground for like 24 minutes. I think if Aljo win, he will probably slow down in the championship rounds like he usually does, and that's why he's getting all these split decision. He's looking good early, and then he slowed down. But if he slowed down against O'Malley and he's not able to get the fight to the ground, there's good chances that he get finished or then he look bad, and the judges will probably give the decision to O'Malley because they probably want him to win, like you said. And yeah, I just
Dana White's like, I got 25,000 for an O'Malley scorecard. Just saying.
yeah, it's like plus 700 or something for the decision prop. I think it's the KO is more possible. It's more likely, but I think the decision is also a possible outcome. Yeah, so I think Aljo should be the favorite, but I think the line is wide again. So I did opt in on O'Malley. The exact number I got is plus 245 and plus 230 for 2 units total, just because of the stylistic matchup. And yeah, he can get sub early, but he can also get a KO late. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's a good fight. I'm very excited, Liam, for the co-main event. And yeah, I think we're gonna see NU twice. Not tomorrow, but Saturday. Yeah.
I love it, brother. You got some bold takes, my man, and that's what we love to see. I think that on a fight card like this, it could go topsy-turvy. A lot of people are expecting chalk outcomes, right? And you never met a bookmaker with a part-time job, right? So they're going to bust the parlays somehow, some way, whether that's on the method market, whether that's with, these dogs coming through like you're expecting. But I certainly think that we're in for some fireworks, my man. When I look at this fight on paper, I think both guys are live to win by knockout in round one. And that, for me, always gets me excited for a main event. So I think Aljo's coming in motivated, but maybe a little emotional, right? Coming in a little bit fired up, a little bit potentially off his game. We're seeing guys, like a Sean O'Malley, like a Ian Gary, who are a little bit younger, a little bit more brash, using some of those mind games. Will it pay off? Will it end up blowing up in their face? We'll find out on Saturday. But I do think that is another little compelling narrative here to look at as we come into Saturday night? Could it be a changing of the guard in terms of some of these younger guys and younger ladies breaking through and having their moments in the UFC? That's the theme of the card for me. Boston's getting an absolute show. So my brother, Dravy, it was a pleasure breaking down these fights with you, man. I think we're all smarter having heard what you have to say about these fights. So, brother, please let the people know anywhere they can find you, all the places you're doing great work.
Yeah, thanks for having me, bro. That was a pleasure. It was very fun. Yeah, so you guys can find me on Twitter. It's Dravy_. You can also find me on Better Me Tips. It's Dravy. It's linked on my Twitter, and I think you link in the bio as well, right? And you can also follow Be the Line Broadcast on Twitter. That's my show that I started. We're doing Twitter Spaces now weekly, probably the next Wednesday. So I just started doing that, and eventually we're gonna move to YouTube. So it's Be the Line Broadcast on Twitter. So if you guys can get a follow here, I would appreciate it. We just started the week before, so yeah, it's brand new. And yeah, I think that's gonna be a good card, Liam. I expect some violence. I expect some dogs to cash. And the beauty about this game is when you play big dogs like that, you don't need to win them all. Just need one of them, and then you're having a good night. So yeah, there's gonna be some good fights, and I can't wait for them.
Last week, I had only one tracked bet that ended up coming through in terms of one fight that I got right, and it paid for all the ones that I got wrong. So I'm right there with you, brother. That's why we bet the big plus money. That's why we look for those angles. Hope that you guys got some good information out of this breakdown. If you have questions, comments, concerns, make sure that you go ahead and fire those off in the comment section below. I'm very responsive in the comments. So if you guys have those questions, please do not hesitate to fire those off. In terms of where you guys can find this show, you can find it on podcast, guys, everywhere. Search Liam Picks Fights. You'll find my first look, my Bets and Banter show every week in your feed. And also, I'm going to get this timestamp today. I know people have been getting on me in the comments. I've had a very busy week, got a lot of stuff on the agenda, but make sure that I get the timestamps done in a timely fashion for this card, because I know it's a big pay-per-view, and I'm sure you guys are all as excited as I am. So wanted to say God bless you all. I hope that you enjoy those fights. I hope that you all win some bets. And until next time, come back next week and we're going to have all the same fun again. Take care, everybody.